Chapter 501. Don't be nervous. Let me finish. There was no other way. These people wouldn't understand even if she told them about germs. Jingwan could only make up some nonsense. Of course, even if it was nonsense, it had to be within a reasonable range. It had to be enough to convince people and not just speak without thinking. As everyone knows, cleaning up the battlefield after a war and burying the bodies of the soldiers is not only to bury the loyal soldiers, but also to burn the enemy soldiers. The purpose is the same. Also, whether it's an earthquake or a flood, it has to be dealt with after a natural disaster. If it's not dealt with, people might get infected. If they get infected, they might pass the disease to others. It's clear that not only the dead carry the pathogen. Similarly, a clean place is not only more comfortable, it's also less easy to get sick. So, whether it's for the sake of the soldiers or the people taking care of them, a clean place is very necessary. The reason was actually very simple. It's just that people didn't notice it. Once it was pointed out, it wasn't that hard to accept. Especially as a doctor, he should have a deeper experience in this aspect. So, after Jingwan finished speaking, many people fell into deep thought. Princess's words are reasonable. It's just that we have limited manpower. It's a little better if there's no war. Once there's a war, one person can't wait to be split into several people. Why don't we ask the commoners for help? Not to mention other things, just provide daily food. I believe that many people will be willing. More than one person smiled bitterly. The old doctor opened his mouth and said, "Princess, you don't know. The food that is distributed to us is only a small portion of the food given to the soldiers who are neither injured nor sick. For people like us, because we don't have a military status, we don't even get any food. We have to take care of our own food. After all, we have to make sure that the other soldiers are full and have enough strength to fight. It's not that we haven't thought of asking the commoners for help, but we don't have enough strength. The food shortage is to this extent." Jingwan frowned. From what she knew, it shouldn't be like this. It doesn't matter if there's enough food or not. It's the usual practice. If there's not enough food, perhaps not even a ration will be given. After all, these people are already. Jingwan naturally understood what he was trying to say. Anger appeared on her face. "How dare you? They fought with their lives in order to protect the people and defend the territory. Since they were injured, they should be taken better care of. Wouldn't such a method be chilling? Who would still fight with all their might?" Jingwan knew that many disabled soldiers did not receive any compensation when they returned home. They were seen as burdens by their families and led miserable lives. No one remembered their contributions and sacrifices. At the same time, they also knew that this would be the end result. Therefore, they had some misgivings on the battlefield. They would either protect themselves or simply die. If one was injured and did not receive proper care, a light injury could turn into a serious injury. A serious injury was basically equivalent to a disability. That was why the casualty rate on the battlefield was so high. Everyone understood this principle and some people were willing to do something. However, they could not do it rashly because it would be taboo to the people in power. As for those in power, there were many things they had to consider. Even if they were to do something, they might not necessarily be able to do it. The most typical example was when an emperor rewarded a commoner with a golden bowl for something. When it reached the bottom, the first layer would be replaced with silver, the second layer would be replaced with porcelain, and in the end, it might become a rough bowl. Even if it was a rough bowl, it might not reach the hands of the person who was originally rewarded. Jingwan closed her eyes and suppressed the anger in her heart. "Go and gather the people. If there's no food, pay the wages. I'll pay. It's fine if we don't encounter it. I'm too far away to help. But since we've encountered it, we should do our best." Jingwan looked at the soldiers who were living in the houses or groaning in pain under the casually built sheds outside. They're doing it for the Qi Yuan and for the people. We can't ignore them. Princess is merciful. Merciful? Huh? Jingwan laughed mockingly. She was not merciful at all. She supported her husband to start a war in the future, expand the territory, and strengthen the Qi Yuan. Instead of saying that she was merciful, it was better to say that she was buying people's hearts. If she was said to be buying people's hearts, she could accept it very frankly. After that, Jingwan said a few more points. Every place must be cleaned. The water must be completely boiled every day. The people who took care of the injured must also clean themselves. Not only the environment, but also the bodies of the injured must be kept clean. The closer the place was to the wound, the more careful it was. She did not want to rack her brains to explain the specific details. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. I'll just say a few words about these aspects. In the past, you probably didn't pay attention to the details. Once you pay attention to them, I believe that you will definitely be able to do better. There is only one goal, and that is to give them the best care. Don't abandon them and don't give up. Jingwan only used the last 6 words from her previous life. However, at this moment, it was undoubtedly touching. Not only were the people who were standing silent, many of the people who were lying on the ground were crying silently. They were clearly very seriously injured, but they did not shed a single tear. It was not that no one had told them to live well, but at that time, they were numb and in despair. The people who took care of them had seen too many times and were also numb to it. Many things were done hastily and were done with. Now, there were people who cared about them. There were also people who believed that they would not be abandoned and abandoned. Whether they could do it or not, at least at this moment, their hearts were warm and their blood was hot. There were people who were willing to lend a hand here. Even if some people thought that it was useless, at least they wouldn't feel like they were being completely abandoned. This matter spread quickly. However, Jingwan's identity was intentionally concealed. Because her husband was a prince, there was still the emperor above him. If Jingwan did this openly, she would definitely be suspected. At that time, a good thing would turn into a bad thing, a disaster. There was limited manpower. Jingwan basically sent out all the people around her. The reason why it was basically was because she absolutely could not have less people around her. Doctor, I have an idea. Why don't Gongjiu listen to it and see if it can be done? According to Jingwan's idea, it was to form a battlefield medical team. That's right, they would not be at the back, but at the front, where the two sides were fighting. They would save as many injured people as possible. It should be known that among those who died in the battle, only a small number died at the first moment. The main reason was that they did not receive treatment and were unable to move. In the end, they died from excessive bleeding or pain. We don't need to go too deep. Just near the edge of the battlefield, where there is still space, soldiers will send the injured people down. Even if they can't, they will still be conscious. As long as they persevere, even if they crawl to the side, they will be saved. I believe that all of you know better than me that even if they receive treatment a moment earlier, the number of people who can survive will be less than the original number. Not to mention the doctor, even Gong Jiu's eyes flashed slightly. Your Highness, this idea is not bad, but there are too few doctors. Even here, there are very few people who are truly skilled in medicine. Saving people on the battlefield does not necessarily require medical skills. It is enough to know first aid. For example, know how to stop bleeding and know how to fix broken bones so that it will not cause secondary injuries. Simple first aid is only to help the injured people hold on for a short period of time, and then send them down one by one. What we need to strive for is time. I believe that as long as they go through simple training, many people can do it. The doctor's eyes became brighter. As a military doctor who had been at the rear of the battlefield for many years, he knew better than anyone else how many people could be saved by doing this. Moreover, those who were disabled only had minor injuries, but they ended up being disabled because of suppuration. Some of their bones could be set back, but they did not manage to do so in time. If these people were saved immediately, they could still return to the battlefield. After being baptized by blood, they would be more fearless and brave, and they would also have more experience. Without a doubt, the casualties would be reduced even further. There are indeed fewer doctors at the rear. Regarding this point, we can actually recruit from the people. I believe that there will be some loyal people. Otherwise, we can give them benefits and fame. After all, they are at the rear of the battlefield, and there is basically no danger to their safety. Based on the current situation, unless the Qi Yuan army is completely defeated, there will be no problem in this prefecture. However, will the Qi Yuan army be defeated so easily? Your Highness, what you said is indeed very reasonable. I will go and look for General Fu now to recruit the doctors. It will be better if they send an official document. No, I think it is better to do these things in private. Jingwan shook her head. Why? The doctor was puzzled. Jingwan pointed to the sky. To General Fu. Jingwan shook her head again. That is why General Fu can't show up. The doctor was shocked and his expression did not look good. However, he knew the importance of certain things, so he kept his mouth shut. Then I will do it. Jingwan nodded. These things can't be done in a short period of time. We have to do it step by step. However, now that we have a prototype, it should be of great help in the future. Anyway, Jingwan was thinking that if some things were done now, it might be done on a large scale in the future. It would definitely be of great help to the war. Her ability was limited and there was not much that she could do. Moreover, the development of history always needed a process. Things that were too heaven-defying could not appear. However, what Jingwan learned in her previous life was not those. It was just that there was already gunpowder in this spacetime and it was not used in the military. Should she let people study it from this aspect? Gong Jiu, in this period of time, passed down the suture technique. Since you have already specially studied it, the details will definitely be clearer than what I told you at the beginning. You have to explain it to them clearly one by one. This may be a matter that will benefit the present generation and the future generations. You may even record it in the annals of history. Jingwan made a rare joke. Even if it is recorded in the annals of history, the first name should be yours, Wang Fei. Gong Jiu lowered his eyebrows and converged his eyes, speaking quite seriously. Jingwan was also helpless towards a certain person's shadow guards who were basically all expressionless. Don't talk nonsense. You have to do your best, for now, and also for the future. Towards Jin Qinhuang's ambition, these subordinates basically had some understanding. Therefore, Gong Jiu understood what Jingwan was referring to. Yes. Each of them split up to act. Because she saw that everyone was busy, Jingwan wanted to roll up her sleeves and personally do it. At this moment, the pampered lifestyle that she had cultivated in the past, where she stretched out her hand for clothes and opened her mouth for food, seemed to have disappeared without a trace. However, it was very clear that before she could put it into action, she was completely stopped. What a joke, to let Wang Fei do these things, they could all commit suicide as an apology. Moreover, even if they were injured, even if they were to die, it was impossible to let Wang Fei help look for care. These people also did not have the guts to let Jingwan do it. However, after being stopped, Jingwan also realized that if she really did it, when a certain person came back, he would probably personally chop them up. Well, she forgot for a moment, that woman did not give or receive personally. Moreover, she was honored, the injured were humble. Finding a stool, Jingwan sat down. She seemed to be lost in thought, but in reality, she should be thinking about something. That, Wang Fei Nyang. Her thoughts were interrupted. Jingwan regained her senses and looked at the few girls. You are still here? What's the matter? They wanted to say how thoroughly they were ignored. They were clearly living people, so their presence shouldn't be so insignificant, right? However, after being speechless for a moment, they pulled themselves together. Wang Fei Nyang, we also want to help. That, the matter of recruiting doctors, can you leave it to us? Perhaps they had slightly adapted, although the smell here was still somewhat unbearable, but it was not as unbearable as it was at the beginning. Speaking of which, these girls, to a certain extent, were the local snakes of this prefectural city. They were born in the year of the crab and could do whatever they wanted. If they were to do it, it would indeed save a lot of energy. Moreover, if they were to participate, then these matters would not be easily spread to the capital. Go back and discuss with your family before making a decision. As for the possibility of her organization's matters being exposed, Could she say that all the communication channels between the northwest region and the capital were already in the hands of her husband? If they wanted to secretly communicate with the capital, to a certain extent, it was simply courting death. However, Jing Yuan was still touched that the old doctor took the initiative to help her hide this matter. Because some things could not be said openly, she could only let them do as they wished and remember their kindness in her heart. However, the old doctor had been with the Northeast Army for many years, so his knowledge was indeed extraordinary. The few girls looked at each other. If they wanted to take over this matter, it was indeed impossible for them to do it alone. They would definitely need the help of their family members. Young people always had some impulsiveness and enthusiasm, so they all bid farewell to Jing Yuan. If the dignified prince could do it, they could naturally do it too. Didn't they always want to do their part for the war? There were even girls who clamored to go to the battlefield. Naturally, they were not allowed to do so. Now that there was someone to lead them, they finally found the right direction. Naturally, they were very excited. After sending the few girls away, Jing Yuan asked someone to prepare a brush and ink. She began to write and draw. After all, there were many things that she only had a little clue about. Because there were too many things, she might forget another point when she thought of one point. Thus, she might as well write down one point by one and then refine it one by one. Perhaps she would give it to others and let them see if it was feasible. If it was feasible, she would add to it and improve it. If it was not suitable, Jing Yuan would not force it. Time passed in such a hurry. More than 2 hours later. Your Highness, this place is not very good after all. If you stay here for too long, I'm worried that it will affect your health. Why don't you go back first? There are many things that you can slowly think about when you go back. It's the same. Jing Yuan thought for a while and finally nodded. If there was really a problem, the people around her would not be able to bear the consequences. That's fine too. Jing Yuan asked someone to inform the old doctor and the others. Then, she got up and went back. Once he focused his mind, he would forget everything around him. When Li Hongyuan came back, he saw that Jing Yuan had almost buried herself in a pile of papers. She was still there writing at a fast speed. After Li Hongyuan came back, he had heard about his wife's actions from his subordinates. So, he had already expected that she would be restless. However, who was Li Hongyuan? Naturally, he could see the benefits that these things could bring. However, in his previous life, after Fu Yunting was rehabilitated, Jing Yuan's actions were also dug out. But, why was there no such thing? Li Hongyuan thought for a while and quickly understood the crux of the matter. Li Hongyuan picked up the papers that were scattered on the floor one by one. He shook it a little and looked at it again. Overall, it was very scattered. Some of the things were just concepts and were very rough. Some of the things were very detailed. However, Li Hongyuan could easily pick out the things that were not suitable. It was obvious that this was not her specialty. Many of the things were only vaguely known. She did not understand the actual situation in Qi Yuan. Hence, it was a little messy. However, with so many things, it was obvious that Jing Yuan had put in a lot of effort. Of course, Li Hongyuan also noticed that there were a lot of words that were written too quickly. He did not know if it was because she wrote too quickly or something else. After thinking for a while, he realized that it was true. The frequency of the words appearing should not be so high. So, it should be the words from Yuan's previous life. Because of this, Li Hongyuan became more and more curious about Jing Yuan's past. However, curiosity was just curiosity. He had no chance to see it. Jing Yuan put down her pen and shook her wrist. She raised her hand and rubbed the back of her neck. When she looked up and saw Li Hongyuan, a smile appeared on her face. "Ah Yuan, you're back? How long have you been back? Why didn't you call me?" Li Hongyuan placed the papers in his hand on the table and turned to stand behind Jing Yuan. He reached out and gently massaged her neck and shoulder. "Seeing that you were so serious, I couldn't bear to disturb you. But why did you have to push yourself so hard? Everything can't be done overnight. It's about time. You need to rest. Otherwise, you don't have to do these things anymore." Jingwan tilted her head and leaned towards Li Hongyuan. Didn't I accidentally fall into a trance? At the beginning, there were a lot of things that I couldn't sort out clearly, so it seemed a little chaotic. Once things were sorted out, there was nothing for me to do. Of course. If things were sorted out and you still had to do it personally, then there wouldn't be many people left in Qi Yuan. It's almost the end. Hey, how can you say that? This is the empire of the Li royal family. Li Hongyuan didn't take it to heart. No dynasty lasts forever. Prosperity and decline, ups and downs. What's there to be concerned about? You're right, but it's not time for Qi Yuan to be divided yet. Moreover, I'll have a share of it in the future. So, don't talk nonsense. Li Hongyuan's finger brushed across her cheek and he chuckled. It's not even in your mouth yet. Wan, have you already learned how to protect your food? Shouldn't I? Shouldn't you? But Wan is wrong about one thing. You won't just have a share. You'll have all of it. Jingwan smiled. Regarding this point, she did not deny this man's words. What was his was hers. This had nothing to do with her own wishes. Jingwan tugged at him. Come, help me take a look. Help me pick out the ones that are not suitable. There's no hurry. It's already dinner. It won't be too late to take a look after dinner. It's already so late? Time really passed quickly. How's it going on your side? What's the situation? Calm down. Let's eat first. His wife was too diligent. She wouldn't rest until things were done. Didn't she find it tiring? Well, perhaps it was because she had exhausted her brain power, but Jingwan also felt quite hungry. When her stomach was about 40 to 50% full, she slowed down. There was no such thing as not talking while eating between husband and wife. There's something wrong with the feng shui of the altar. It's a treasure land, but it's a haunted house. I don't know if it was a mistake when I checked the feng shui or someone did something bad inside. When the monk who was presiding over the ritual heard about my intention to leave, he was shocked and checked it countless times. Only then did he confirm the real reason. It's obvious that the place is hidden very deeply. A haunted house is easy to gather in qi. It's reasonable to say that it's only the spirit, so it's better to nourish it with yin qi. However, the imperial noble consort situation is different. The altar is used to pray for blessings. During the war in the northwest, countless yin qi gathered in the altar and all went to the imperial noble consort. According to the situation, before we left, you went to see imperial noble consort Shu, but the main influence didn't come from here. If you only found out that something was wrong now, the imperial noble consort Shu you saw probably wasn't dead, but almost like a dead person. Jingwan's expression changed slightly. Then imperial noble consort Shu and imperial noble consort are now. It's okay. Master Liaochen is suppressing it. Then, how do you solve the current situation? You were there for a day. Did you solve it? The ritual has already started. The altar can't be destroyed and rebuilt. So, the only way is to change the feng shui. There's nothing else for us to do. That's good. Then, what about the situation in the south? How do you solve it? You don't have to worry about Wan. It'll be solved soon. He had a basic idea of the situation in the south. Since that was the case, Jingwan was relieved. She threw the question aside and didn't ask any more. She began to talk about the things she had prepared. Li Hongyuan was a little helpless. But his wife was so diligent. Wouldn't he be able to slack off in the future? Thinking about it, it seemed to be a good idea. Jingwan still didn't know that her shameless husband was thinking of her as free labor. She talked about some of her plans and ideas. Because it was too divergent, it didn't seem to be limited to the current situation. Unknowingly, some of her ideas had already flown out of the sky. Li Hongyuan listened quietly. Occasionally, he would open his mouth to pull Jingwan's thoughts away. No matter what Jingwan said, he would point out the pros and cons of it and the possibility of implementation if he could understand it. If he didn't understand, he would ask for more details and then give his opinion. After a few times, Jingwan slowly came back to her senses. The way she looked at Li Hongyuan was a little strange. She seemed to have said a little too much just now. She seemed to have said a lot of words from her previous life, but this man seemed to be able to understand it without any pressure. Not only that, no matter what she said, he seemed to be able to give effective suggestions. Even if it was just a concept, he could expand it countless times more thoroughly according to his own understanding. He was simply an all-rounder. Even if he was the emperor, didn't he only need to control the overall situation? You're so good. How can those court officials be fooled? How can they slack off? You'll make those people ashamed, you know? What's wrong? https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/128638332. HTML. Click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version reading website. Bicken.com. Chapter 502. No, I just feel that it's very powerful. Such a high-quality super rich and handsome man, she seemed to have profited a lot. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows and smiled. What's very powerful? Wasn't this asking the obvious? Did he want her to name it? This was actually not a matter of face, but narcissism, right? Narcissism. Li Hongyuan pondered for a moment. No, this husband only loves Wan. Was her face smeared with words of love again? A certain someone's ability to speak words of love was originally full, but now, was it the rhythm of breaking through the sky? Any time, any place, any topic could be turned to this. However, Jingwan had self-control and was now completely calm. It was just that she seemed to have inadvertently said the words in her heart. This was not good. Li Hongyuan saw that Jingwan was eating very elegantly and seriously and silently smiled. His own wife's way of being shy was really unique. However, a certain someone did not point it out, otherwise his wife would fly into a rage out of humiliation. In the end, it had been a hard day. Although he quite liked to see her angry appearance like a kitten, as a qualified husband, he should have a sense of propriety. He also slowly began to eat. To a certain extent, the two people's current actions could be called a model of etiquette at the dining table. Because the two people were chatting, the duration of this meal was much longer than before. Until they finished eating, Jingwan then thought of a problem. That was, why didn't things like the suture technique appear? After all, these things were not that complicated. She only needed to know the general process. According to Jin Qinhuang's power and status, as long as she had a little memory, she only needed to say a word and the people below would certainly be able to make it look good. I don't have this kind of memory. Later on, when I was at war with various countries, according to reason, these beneficial things, especially those that you proposed, it's impossible for me not to use them. Can only mean one thing: those who knew about these things all died in that war. Even the remaining things were all destroyed. Li Hongyuan said without any joy or anger. Jingwan fell silent. Then, she forced a smile. Maybe it never existed in the first place? Wan, do you believe your own words? Li Hongyuan was surprisingly calm. During the day, I met the doctor of the Northeast Army. Because of that old man, some things went smoothly. I was prepared to fight a protracted war with them and let them accept it bit by bit. According to what you said, in your past life, the Northeast Army was completely annihilated. Although the true Maiden Mountain didn't manage to make it out alive, it's still a far cry from the current situation. The old doctor and the others may have died in that battle, so it's impossible for them to help the Northwest Army, so... Li Hongyuan chuckled. There was a hint of mockery in his laughter. Wan has also learned to deceive herself? Okay, maybe a little. Jingwan was discouraged, but a moment later, she was in high spirits again. The most important thing right now is that there are some things that must be built up and carried forward. She couldn't help him, but now it's time. Seeing her like this, Li Hongyuan couldn't help but laugh. All his efforts, wasn't it all for her? For her to be so energetic, it was enough. In the days that followed, Li Hongyuan and Jing Wan were busy separately. However, on the surface, it seemed that only Jing Wan was busy. Jin Qin Wang was the one who looked on with folded arms and was so idle that he was moldy. He would even cause trouble from time to time. Those few young ladies who first came into contact with Jing Wan, they had already obtained their family's consent and became Jing Wan's helpers. When they first saw Li Hongyuan, perhaps they were blushing and their hearts were racing, feeling a little amorous. Later on, when they realized his true colors, they began to dislike him and even felt injustice for Jing Wan. Wang Fei Nyang Nyang was a person who was good in every aspect. How could she marry such a wine-sack rice bag? It must be that the imperial power was pressuring people, so Wang Fei Nyang had no choice but to marry. These words, once whispered in front of Jing Wan. Jing Wan listened and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She turned back and used these words to ridicule a certain person. Unfortunately, a certain person didn't care at all and was willing to be a vase. Thinking about it, if a certain person cared about these things, then he wouldn't have specially created such an unbearable reputation. However, this vase of his, on the surface, it looked like porcelain, but on the inside, it was comparable to diamond. Therefore, those who understood his nature would know that not only was he beautiful on the outside, when he swung this vase, those swords, spears, swords, and halberds could all be broken in his hands. Towards Jin Qin Wang, it wasn't just these few girls who had complaints. Those who had come in contact with Jing Wan, 99% of them had opinions, but they didn't dare to say it. Therefore, every time they saw Jing Wan and Li Hongyuan together, they unconsciously shook their heads and secretly sighed. What a pity, ah, what a pity. The expressions and moods of Li Hongyuan's subordinates were quite subtle. Although when they were in the capital, their master was said to have no other good points other than his outer skin, but they had never personally experienced it before. Now, they could feel their master being disliked at all times. It was simply too obvious. Each and every one of them looked down and pretended to be deaf and mute, sighing in their hearts. These people were really ignorant and fearless, doing things that all the high officials and nobles in the capital didn't dare to do. And if the people in the capital saw this scene, they would probably be so shocked that their jaws would drop. However, the most surprising thing was probably the indifference of the living king of hell. Therefore, the misunderstanding in this was really a bit big. Everyone in the capital feared Jin Qin Wang and avoided him like the plague. If it wasn't an absolutely safe place, they probably wouldn't dare to say a single bad word about Jin Qin Wang. Naturally, there was no way to know that the living king of hell didn't care about these at all. However, normal people wouldn't care about saying bad things in front of people who were incomparably fearful. Therefore, even if they knew, they still wouldn't dare. Moreover, the living king of hell didn't take these ordinary people seriously. For those with status, he might still be quite giving face. Just like the immortals and Buddhas, they always disdained to pay attention to ants, but for those who were on the same level or lower as themselves, if they offended them, they would still be quite interested in teaching the other party how to be a new person. In Li Hongyuan's case, although his status was on the same level as him, his strength wasn't on the same level. His biggest interest was probably to arm wrestle with the person above him. Jingwan's tolerance towards Li Hongyuan was getting higher and higher. Even if he occasionally caused trouble, at most, she would drive him away and continue with what she was doing. However, for those generals in the army, even if Fu Yunting said that Jin Qin Wang was fine, they were still worried and would pay attention to Jin Qin Wang's situation from time to time. When they received the situation, their expressions were also strange and abnormal. After that, they still silently put the matter to one side. After all, what Jin Qin Wang Fei was doing now seemed to be beneficial to them. Those wounded soldiers were once their subordinates. If they said that they didn't feel the least bit heartache, that would be a lie. Even if they couldn't fight together in the future, to be able to receive good care was still gratifying. However, this kind of thinking finally changed when the first batch of wounded soldiers returned in good condition. It must be known that, in their consensus, Those who were sent to the rear, if not dying, were to be sent home. Those who could continue to fight on the battlefield with minor injuries were basically dealt with by themselves. But now, some of them came back alive and kicking. How could it not be surprising? Apart from being surprised, they naturally wanted to see it with their own eyes. After all, they had only heard about it before, and those things that they heard basically made them confused. At this time, it had been almost a month since Jingwan and the others arrived in the northwest. During this period, there were several large and small battles. There were still people dying in the wounded barracks every day, but compared to the beginning, there was no more death and despair pressing down on their heads. They even took care of each other, encouraged each other, and wanted to live on together. And the biggest change was the surrounding environment. Although the houses were still relatively old, there was no sense of dilapidation. Moreover, it was clean and tidy, and there was no unpleasant smell. Is this really the place where the wounded were placed? The generals' hearts were filled with disbelief. Wasn't this change a little too big? The great general and the other generals have come. Their group of people were all wearing armor and were not too conspicuous. Naturally, they were noticed at the first moment. It was not that the generals had never set foot in this place, but it was just that the number of times they had been here was very little. This was because if they saw it too much, they would always feel sad and affect their mood. If they did not adjust in time, it was very likely that it would affect the next battle. Not only did they rarely set foot in this place, even the soldiers under their command basically forbade them from coming over. The reason was all the same. More and more people noticed them, and one by one, they looked over. Many people even surrounded them, and kept calling out, "Great General, General, some general." It was enough to show that these people were full of feelings for these generals. Their mental outlook was completely different, and their originally gloomy mood was swept away at this time. Good, good. He could not help but reach out and pat their shoulders. This way, even if they were crippled, they still saw hope. Great General. A young man walked forward with his head held high. On the surface, Quan looked fine. Fu Yunting's pupils shrank fiercely. "Xiao Hu, you're still alive?" As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized that he had said something wrong. It was because he was too shocked. No, that Xiao Hu was originally Fu Yunting's personal guard. He was a small team leader and had enough military merits. When he was about to be promoted, because he was protecting another soldier, his stomach was directly cut open, and his intestines were already exposed. In such a situation, there was no possibility of survival. But now, he was standing perfectly fine. Xiao Hu could understand his superior's mood very well. He himself couldn't believe that he could survive, so he smiled carelessly. "General, this subordinate is lucky. My stomach was sewn up by Dr. Gong, and there are no abnormalities so far. If you ask me, I can go back to the war. Everyone else is fine, but the princess consort is the one who can't get over it. She said that if I don't recover well, it might relapse or even split open. Now that the princess consort is the boss here, we can do whatever she says. If we dare to disobey, we might be surrounded and beaten up by others, so we can only stay here for the time being and help with something. But General, wait for this subordinate, at most 10 days, I can definitely go back." Xiao Hu was sent here after the first battle after Jingwan and the others came. Fu Yunting's eyes flashed slightly, and he patted his shoulder. "Okay, when you come back, we will all fight side by side." The most amazing thing was that his stomach could be sewn open again. These generals even wanted to lift his clothes, regardless of where they were. Xiao Hu hurriedly stopped him. It was fine if they were in the barracks. Everyone was a man, but not here. Other than the sisters-in-law from the common people, there were also some unmarried young ladies. How could they casually lift their clothes? After Xiao Hu said this, these people embarrassedly stopped. They also knew about this situation, but they forgot for a moment. The wound on his stomach could not be seen, but there was no problem with his forearm. The wound on his stomach was fatal, but there were 7 or 8 wounds on his body. When his sleeve was rolled up, the palm-wide scar looked like a ferocious centipede. However, these generals did not feel that it was ugly or anything, but magical. That's right, magical. They did not feel that it was unacceptable at all. In fact, as long as they could keep their lives, this was nothing. The wound on my stomach is similar to this. Xiao Hu chuckled and patted his stomach. Dr. Gong said that the wounds on my arms and legs are relatively easy to heal. For places like my stomach, especially when it was directly cut, it depends on luck to heal. It can be seen that my life is absolutely tough. Your luck is indeed good. I know about Dr. Gong that you mentioned. He is the person who treated the Empress and the others. His medical skills are absolutely first class. Fu Yunting said with a smile. So powerful? Xiao, who was obviously shocked and a little proud. The Empress, the person who served the Empress, served him. Fu Yunting did not know whether to laugh or cry. Good for you. Let me ask you, are the prince and princess consort always here? The prince is not here every day, but the princess consort is almost always here. He did not care about the former, but was full of respect for the latter. Because the difference was too obvious, it was hard for people to ignore it. That is the imperial court's prince. Xiao Hu, you cannot be disrespectful. Fu Yunting nervously warned. How terrifying was the king of hell? The average person absolutely could not bear it. Xiao Hu also felt that something was wrong. But, everyone is the same Although they did not say it directly, everyone's mood was very obvious. That prince was also not that bad The young generals who came from the capital looked at each other and muttered, "This vicious beast that specializes in eating people has become a vegetarian." No matter how they thought about it, it felt strange Shut up. Fu Yunting softly reprimanded. If these words were to reach the King of Hell's ears, even if it was really a vegetarian, it could still continue to eat people. They quickly shut their mouths tightly. No matter what, he is a prince. You all have to be respectful. Fu Yunting thought about it and was still a little uneasy. He lowered his voice a little. Prince Jean is known as the King of Hell in the capital. When other princes see him, they have to take a detour. It is said that there is only a wrong name, there is no wrong nickname, do you understand? The vicious beast was temporarily not human, but it did not mean that it had really become a vegetarian. This time, Xiao Hu was not lightly frightened. Would they settle accounts after the autumn? It's okay, Prince Jean does not bear grudges. If he really wanted to, he would have done it on the spot and would not leave it for the future. The only time he left it for the future to settle accounts was when someone thoroughly annoyed him and wanted to seize his title, throwing him into the dust. A certain young general comforted. The corner of Fu Yunting's mouth twitched. He did not want to speak. It was reported on the spot, that was a small matter. All right, don't say so much. Where is Prince and Wang Fei now? Take us to see them. Fu Yunting stopped him. No matter what, it was not good to talk about people behind their backs. When Fu Yunting and the others arrived, Li Hongyuan naturally received the news at the first moment. When they saw Prince Jean, everyone thought, no wonder. Under an old locust tree, there was a square table with fruit plates, snacks, tea, and even an incense burner. On the reclining chair next to it, Prince Jean was leisurely half reclining with a book in his hand. If it was placed in another place, perhaps it would be pleasing to the eye and no one would be able to hate him. However, at this moment, the people around him were busy. His leisure, wasn't it abnormally hateful? Looking at him, they felt their hands itch and wanted to ruthlessly beat him up. Regarding Li Hongyuan's behavior, Jing Wan was also very helpless. She felt that he was doing it on purpose. It was not enough that he disliked others for being dissatisfied with him, he still wanted to ruthlessly provoke them. No matter how she looked at it, it felt like he was childish and willful like a child. Jing Wan felt that if it was because he wanted to stick to her, he only needed to say a word and she did not have to come here. He did not say anything and she could not help but want to come and take a look. Then, he would follow and do things that would attract hatred. Jing Wan scolded him. He was still very self-confident. The more others were dissatisfied with him, the more they would think that she, this Wang Fei, was not good. Jing Wan was very speechless. She really did not know what he was thinking. Didn't the average person want the two of them to have the same reputation, to make people feel that they were a good match? How could he do the opposite? You have been worshipped as a bodhisattva, and I have become that demon king. Isn't it more clear that nothing can be a barrier between us? Jingwan expressed that she really could not keep up with this person's thoughts. His brain circuit was probably different. There was nothing to say, just let him be. She had a pile of serious matters. Who had the time to wrangle with him? Fu Yunting paused for a moment, but still led the others forward. Greetings to your highness. Li Hongyuan did not even lift his eyelids. He leisurely flipped a page of the book, casually picked up the teacup and took a sip. Scram to the side, you are blocking the light. His tone was exceptionally disdainful. It was really incomparably annoying. What else could they do? Of course, they obediently retreated. Jingwan turned back to take a look. Because she was not done with the matters at hand, she only nodded. The others were basically busy with their own matters. These generals had come over, and it was not the first or second time. They were still doing what they did in the past. For some reason, Fu Yunting's gaze fell on Jingwan. For a moment, he seemed to feel that this scene was familiar, and so, he accidentally became distracted. As Jingwan's ex-husband, at this moment, he was actually staring at Jingwan in a daze. Moreover, he was also noticed by the King of Hell at the first moment. This was simply, Fu Yunting only felt that a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Before he could see clearly, his body flew backwards. Even if there were people behind him who were cushioning him, he did not fly out, but he still fell to the ground with several people. His internal organs seemed to have been dislocated, and he felt a burning pain as he breathed. This was far from over. A hand suddenly clasped his neck and lifted him up. Fu Yunting instinctively struggled, wanting to pry open the hand that was clasping him. However, it was like an iron arm, difficult to move. This sudden change really caught people off guard. However, those generals also subconsciously wanted to save Fu Yunting. However, if they tried to snatch someone from the King of Hell who was going all out, not only would they not be able to snatch him away, they would also probably throw themselves in. Fu Yunting met with Prince Jin's malicious, cold, and murderous eyes. He really felt that he was going to die. His neck bones seemed to be cracking. Ah Yuan. Jingwan's pupils suddenly contracted. She hastily ran over and grabbed Li Hongyuan's hand. Ah Yuan, what are you doing? Quickly let go, let go. Li Hongyuan suddenly turned his head and looked at Jingwan. The emotions in his eyes did not disperse at all. Wan, what did you say? His tone was much slower than usual. Jingwan only felt her scalp go numb. This person obviously thought that she was helping his love rival, or even adulterer. This person was obviously a bit muddle-headed right now. If she really let him think like this, then it was simply adding fuel to the fire. He despised Fu Yunting for not dying fast enough. The current Fu Yunting, in the entire Northwest Army, was very important. He had not suffered any injuries on the battlefield, but now he inexplicably died in the hands of his own country's prince. When the time comes, Li Hongyuan would really be condemned by thousands of people. This was not comparable to his previous bad reputation. This was still secondary. The most important thing was that when the two armies confronted each other, the death of Qi Yuan's commander-in-chief was bound to cause chaos. How could the great sage prince of Xiongnu miss such an opportunity? He would inevitably launch a large-scale attack, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Ah Yuan, it's not like that, really, you have to believe me. You first let go of this person, let go, okay? You let go first, we'll talk slowly. Ah Yuan, I beg you. Meeting Jingwan's pleading eyes, the emotions in Li Hongyuan's eyes finally faded a little and he loosened his grip. How could Fu Yunting still stand? Fortunately, he was supported by several generals in a flurry of hands and feet. Usually, they were afraid of the King of Hell, but at this time, each and every one of them looked at Li Hongyuan with hatred. Their eyes were full of anger, and they clenched their fists tightly to restrain their anger. Otherwise, They were afraid that they would offend their superiors and unceremoniously swing their fists. Even just now, after witnessing Prince Jin's valiance, they were not afraid at all. Gong Zhou, quickly take a look at this person. Jing Wan blocked Li Hongyuan. What are you guys still standing there for? Help this person and take him further away. After dealing with that side, Jing Wan hurriedly pacified Li Hongyuan. Regarding the gratitude and resentment between Li Hongyuan and Fu Yunting, no one else knew about it, so they were all confused. Even Li Hongyuan's trusted aides were baffled by Li Hongyuan's constant targeting of Fu Yunting. Although they knew that their own husband was actually unreasonable, but just now, Fu Yunting must have done something that touched his nerves and made him suddenly flip out. Jing Wan dismissed the people around her and pressed Li Hongyuan to let him sit down. She stood alone in front of him and softly pacified him. At this time, she was really throwing out sweet words and honeyed phrases as if they didn't cost money. She didn't even notice that in this aspect, she was also full of skill points. It was just that she would only use it under special circumstances. In fact, Li Hongyuan also didn't completely lose his rationality. Otherwise, before Jing Wan stopped him, he had enough time to kill Fu Yunting. That violent mood didn't dissipate so easily, but his rationality came back. Jing Wan held his face and was a little impatient. How did he provoke you to make you so angry? This prince really should have killed him from the beginning. Li Hongyuan's eyes were still full of hostility, almost condensing into a solid form. Jing Wan really didn't know what to say. To be honest, she and Fu Yunting didn't have any interactions, but this man's taboo towards her was much, much deeper than Sun Yilan and Chen Jingmin. And Jing Wan herself couldn't resolve this matter. If she were to do it, it might become more troublesome. How dare he stare at you in a daze? If he's not courting death, then what is? Li Hongyuan's killing intent at this moment was unprecedentedly strong. Maybe he just happened to be distracted, or maybe he was looking at someone else. It's just that the direction we were looking at just happened to coincide. I don't know him, so how could he stare at me in a daze? In any case, he was born in the Marquis's household, so he should have some manners. So you're saying that it's this prince's fault? He kept calling her this prince, which was enough to show that his anger hadn't subsided at all. How could it be your fault? Of course not. In order to appease a certain someone, Jing Wan was quite unprincipled. It's just that it might have caused a misunderstanding. Moreover, you know that Fu Yunting can't die now. If he dies, not only will it lead to the fall of the Northwest, but it will also make His Majesty happy. Wouldn't it be a waste of your efforts? Ah Yuan, even if you don't care, I don't want you to carry unnecessary karmic debts. Not only do we have to be together in this life, we also have the next life, and the life after that. So, calm down a bit, okay? Li Hongyuan sneered, but he was indeed slowly controlling himself. If there's a next time, we'll gouge out his eyes. Jing Wan said incomparably, savagely. Li Hongyuan sneered. It was obvious that he despised Jing Wan's outwardly strong but inwardly weak appearance. It didn't matter if she despised him or not, the key was to coax him well. This flare-up from time to time, it was tiring to think about it. However, he was her lover, and she had been promised to him for generations to come. She had to stay by his side until death, so she had to endure it. On the other side, Fu Yunting's situation wasn't very good. Although his internal organs weren't dislocated, his internal organs were indeed bleeding. In addition, several of his ribs were broken, and the worst was naturally his neck. It was likely that he wouldn't be able to speak for a short period of time. However, Fu Yunting was able to maintain his consciousness. This time, he had experienced the feeling of walking through the gates of hell. Although it wasn't the first time that he felt a murderous intent from Jin Qin Wang, he used to think that Jin Qin Wang wouldn't really kill him. However, after just now, he didn't dare to be sure. If it wasn't Jin Qin Wang Fei, however, when he thought of Jin Qin Wang Fei, he felt that it was a bit strange. It wasn't anything else, it was because of what Jing Wan said. Gong Jiu's medical skills were indeed not a joke. After a few needles, he basically stabilized Fu Yunting's situation. However, for Fu Yunting's injury to get better, it wasn't something that could be done with a few needles. It's best for General's injury to recuperate in the rear. How can that be? The military camp simply can't do without General. The West Hun News virtuous king came with a vengeance, wanting to take revenge. If General isn't present, I'm afraid that we won't be able to withstand it. Jin Qin Wang, even if it's a Wangye, he also can't. Fu Yunting didn't care about his own injury and abruptly pulled. Gong Jiu lightly shot a glance at that general. If it's just holding the fort in the military camp, it's fine. However, it's impossible to go to the battlefield. If you go, you won't be able to return. Although Wang Ye's temper isn't good, but it's not like he doesn't know the severity of the matter and doesn't care about the overall situation. I'm afraid that General Fu has done something that angered Wang Ye. How can that be? General was just standing there properly and didn't do anything. Gong Jiu ignored him and indifferently looked at Fu Yunting. Before Wang Ye made a move, I'm sure that General knows best what General Fu was doing. Of course, Fu Yunting was clear, but was it really because of this? Fu Yunting coughed twice, his neck burning with pain. Everyone else looked at Fu Yunting in confusion. It couldn't be that General really did something when they weren't aware of it, right? Gong Jiu continued to speak neither too quickly nor too slowly. To our Wang Ye, Wang Fei is the reverse scale. A glance shouldn't cause any harm, but after a long time, it's hard to say. No matter what General Fu's reason is, General Fu should pay more attention next time. The other people's faces were inexplicably strange. It can't be right? General really kept staring at Jin Qin Wang Fei. Fu Yunting's face flushed red, but his neck was hurting so badly that he couldn't explain it. Alright, these people really misunderstood. Thus, they subconsciously filled in the scenes of love and hate. That's why, even if it was a group of big men, rough men, one shouldn't underestimate their imaginations. But that's not right. If I remember correctly, when General got married, Wang Fei Nyongyang had just entered the capital. Wang Fei Nyongyang had always been outside the capital and General shouldn't have left the capital, so they shouldn't know each other. Could it be that General has wronged sister-in-law and later took a fancy to Wang Fei Nyongyang, and until now, he's still? Fu Yunting couldn't bear it anymore and suddenly stood up, slapping that young general on the head. With this movement, the pain in his chest was almost fatal. However, he still had to say it clearly. Shut up. Fu Yunting endured the pain, his voice was very hoarse. Just now, I was just thinking about other things and was absent-minded. Don't spoil Wang Fei Nyongyang's reputation. The real reason couldn't be explained, so in the end, he was still in the wrong. If that's the case, Jin Qin Wang is too unreasonable. In your eyes, hasn't the King of Hell never been reasonable? Gong Jiu faintly replied. That young general was choked and couldn't say anything. No matter if it's a misunderstanding or some other reason, General Fu can only admit that he's unlucky. Perhaps, this can be considered a lesson. Gong Jiu was a shadow guard. When they carried out their mission, they didn't necessarily rely on assassination. Their ability to control people's hearts far surpassed that of ordinary people. Fu Yunting glanced at Gong Jiu, hearing his meaning, but didn't say anything. In the end, it was for a reason, and on top of that, they met an unreasonable person who they couldn't afford to offend. It seemed that other than admitting that he was unlucky, there was no other way. But thinking about it, if it was himself, the wife that he kept in his heart, was stared at by a man without blinking, he might also flip out. Thinking about it this way, his hatred towards Jin Qin Wang was reduced by a lot. However, for them, this was also a lesson. No matter if it was a young wife or a young lady, it was best not to stare at people for no reason. Even if it was to think about something, it was best to choose a position in advance. Otherwise, if they met such a fierce person like Jin Qin Wang, if they weren't careful, they might even lose their lives. Speaking of fierce, wasn't Jin Qin Wang's martial arts a bit too good? In the army, their great general's individual strength might not be the strongest, but it wasn't a problem for him to be ranked in the top few. When there was nothing to do, they would often exchange pointers in the barracks. Everyone knew that even if they were stronger than him, they wouldn't be that much stronger. It was impossible that they didn't even have the power to fight back. And the people who came down from the battlefield, their vigilance was quite strong. When facing an opponent, if it was Jin Qin Wang, they might not fight back because of their identity. But when they were distracted, fighting back was instinct, and it was the strongest instinct. Their great general didn't resist at all and was completely hung up and beaten. It was enough to see that he didn't have the ability to fight back. When other people came forward, they were also tidied up together. It could be seen that Jin Qin Wang was valiant. If Jin Qin Wang was on the battlefield, he would definitely be invincible. Someone couldn't help but secretly think. But thinking about it, they knew that it was impossible. He was a Qin Wang. Right now, the struggle for the throne was in full swing. If Jin Qin Wang descended on the battlefield like a god of war, how terrifying would the morale of the army be? With hundreds of thousands of troops in his hands, not to mention the other princes, even the emperor would have to be restless. The gazes of the great general vaguely glanced at Jin Qin Wang. Fine, it was better to forget it. If a man didn't have that thought, no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be able to be a man of iron. This kind of man was only suitable for a gentle village, to be gentle and soft. It was just that one day, when Li Hongyuan was about to go to war, they would completely change their thinking. Jingwan coaxed him and felt that it was better to go back earlier. After all, Fu Yunting's current situation wasn't suitable for avoiding. Even if he knew Jingwan's thoughts, Li Hongyuan's face darkened, but in the end, he still followed them. When they wanted to leave, including Fu Yunting, they naturally had to force themselves to stand up and send them off. Li Hongyuan just stood there, but the aura on his body was completely unconcealed. These great general who fought their way out from a pile of corpses couldn't help but feel a chill run down their backs. Gong Zhou, treat General Fu as much as you want. Just now, the exchange of pointers, Ben Wang was quite unsatisfied. When General Fu recovers, Ben Wang still wants to ask for advice. Gong Zhou responded. Fu Yunting was complaining incessantly in his heart. If he had to exchange pointers a few more times, wouldn't he have to throw away his little life? But, could he not respond? The memory of the exchange of pointers was still vivid in his mind. Should he not respond? It would only be more miserable. Although, by exchanging pointers with Jin Qin Wang, his improvement would be quite fast. When Li Hongyuan left with Jingwan, that stifling feeling disappeared. However, after this battle, those who originally had feelings for Li Hongyuan did not dare to blatantly show it. Who was the great general? The Northwest Army's hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If he wanted to clean them up, then what did they count as? If he was angry, he could crush them to death with one finger. This small episode, for the time being, passed like this. But the next day, the great sage king of the Western Xiongnu personally led his army to challenge. At this time, Fu Yunting, let alone going on the field to fight, even if he put on his armor, his face would still be pale. Speaking of which, Fu Yunting had never fought with the great sage king of the Western Xiongnu before. The last time he seriously injured the great sage king, it was all because of a trick. Then, the great sage king was injured by several people. Speaking of which, the original plan was to completely detain the great sage king, but in the end, he still managed to escape. From this, it can be seen that the great sage king is not only good at scheming, but his martial arts are also quite strong. One must know that the Xiongnu army's strength is originally known for their bravery. This was the first time the great sage king directly called out Fu Yunting. What does this mean? Could it be that there are spies in the Qi Yuan army? How did they find out about Fu Yunting's injury in such a short period of time? https://www.beacon.com/11/11807/129226664. HTML chapter error. Please click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Bicken. Com Mobile Edition. Chapter 503. The West Hun tribe's king of the virtuous Western Hun tribe was probably just probing to see if there was a change in Qi Yuan's commander-in-chief, or if there was a problem. He did not expect to hit the mark by a fluke. Of course, he could not rule out the possibility of a spy, but this possibility was relatively small. After all, everything was fine before and there was no trouble. Furthermore, since Jin Qinhuang dared to bring Jin Qinhuang along, he must have understood the situation here and cleaned up everything that needed to be cleaned up. It was hard to say how many people Jin Qinhuang had planted here, but it was definitely not a small number. Previously, he did not give him any information, but Jin Qinhuang was able to understand the situation here clearly. He even asked him to inform him of the Xiongnu's military strength and arrange tactics. If he did not have any manpower, would he be able to do this? After arriving, he was afraid that the defenses would be even tighter. Spies were only a small number of people, so it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to enter and leave. However, the current situation was indeed a little tricky. If he did not respond to this battle, it would definitely affect his own morale. Being afraid before the battle was definitely a taboo, but if he responded, there was no doubt that Fu Yunting would not be able to return. This was the third time that the Xiongnu had sent people to the front of the battle. If he did not respond, it would also cause chaos on his own side. The West Hun tribe's king of the virtuous Western Hun tribe would definitely take the opportunity to do something. Otherwise, it would be a waste of such a good opportunity. Follow me out first. There was no good solution at the moment, so Fu Yunting decided to go to the front to take a look. "General, how can your body?" Fu Yunting waved his hand. "I don't have to fight, but I can't not show myself." It was just that because of his injuries, he could not wear armor. However, Fu Yunting thought about it and already had a way to deal with it. He did not even bother to hide his relatively pale face because this could be an opportunity for him to probe the enemy. Even if he wore a brocade robe, he would look like a noble young master and not an invincible commander-in-chief on the battlefield. Before the battle, he paused and went to the watchtower. He did not go to the top floor, but to the middle floor. He used the clairvoyance to take a look. TSK, there was really a lot of people. The all-seeing eye spun in his hand and turned around to descend the watchtower. Fu Yunting got on the horse nimbly. If his body was fine, there would be no problem. But at this time, it seemed like he was trying to act cool. However, he had no choice. He could not let the soldiers know about his physical condition. So, he was not trying to act cool, but to suffer. Fu Yunting rode his horse to the front of the formation, and the formation automatically dispersed. He walked to the front and faced the West Hun tribe's virtuous king from a distance. Both sides had more than 30,000 people on the same field. From afar, they looked densely packed. However, at this moment, it was very quiet. It seemed that only the sound of the wind and the sound of the war horses could be heard. "I trust Virtuous Monarch has been well since we last met. I had wanted to meet Virtuous Monarch for a long time, but I couldn't find the opportunity. The field was too wide. If they wanted to spread their words far enough, they naturally needed someone to shout. Although the two commanders of the two armies shouted across the air, their voices wouldn't be as loud as mosquitoes. In addition, martial artists had sharp ears and eyes. It was enough for them to hear each other. However, on the battlefield, there were some things that needed more people to know. So, it was necessary to have some loud voices in the army. I also have this regret. That's why I specially chose today. However, it seems that General Fu does not intend to accept the challenge. The West Hun tribe's virtuous king had lived outside for many years. His first stop was Qi Yuan. Moreover, he had lived there for the longest time. If he wanted to understand a country's culture, the language was naturally the first test. This virtuous king was actually quite talented in this aspect. He could speak authentic Qi Yuan's official language very smoothly. Moreover, there were many people around him who understood Qi Yuan's language. And this virtuous king, compared to the other Han tribe soldiers, was not as tall and sturdy. Even if he was influenced by the culture of other countries, his words and actions were like those around him, revealing a scholarly aura. He did not fit in with a group of barbarians. This was also where some people who fought for power with him attacked him. It's not that I don't want to fight hard. It's just that unfortunately, my general's health has not been good for the past 2 days. I'm afraid that I can't let virtuous king enjoy to your heart's content. I hope that virtuous king will forgive me. Fu Yunting was very elegant and sincere. I see. If I force General Fu to fight, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? However, in my Han tribe, there is no reason to take back a challenge. Han tribe men, even if they have to crawl, they must crawl to accept the challenge. Judging from virtuous king's words, you must fight? If that's the case, then so be it. Men, bring me my weapon. Fu Yunting said calmly. As for what he was thinking in his heart, that was a completely different matter. General, you can't, your health. Fu Yunting waved his hand. It's fine. It's just a cold. It's not to the extent that I can't fight. Moreover, this general believes that virtuous king will not take advantage of me. He ordered a guard to bring the halberd. Fu Yunting's expression was indifferent, but in reality, he was extremely uncomfortable. Just by holding the halberd, he was already faintly sweating. However, he could not let others see the slightest bit of strain. He tried his best to be as calm as possible. Right now, his throat hurt the most. Originally, it was best not to speak, but if he raised his voice, it would be burning. His legs squeezed the horse's belly and he rode towards the middle of the two armies. Right now, he was only gambling. He was gambling on the virtuous king's demeanor, gambling on the Xiongnu people's integrity. He was gambling that the virtuous king was still probing. The Xiongnu people were valiant and had their own pride. They would never retreat. Even if they knew that the opponent's condition was not good, they would not easily make a move. Even if they won, it would be an unfair victory. However, in a battle between two armies, there was a precondition to not taking advantage of the opponent's situation. One could not easily kill the opponent. If the virtuous king knew that Fu Yunting's current condition was not a match for one of his attacks, it would be strange if the virtuous king did not take the opportunity to kill Fu Yunting. Killing their general in front of tens of thousands of generals would cause the morale of the army to collapse. Compared to an unprecedented victory, compared to fertile land, abundant food, and countless beautiful women, the virtuous king's demeanor and integrity could be used to feed grassland wolves. Fu Yunting rode his horse farther and farther away. The virtuous king of the West Xiongnu people also rode his horse and slowly came out. Seeing that the distance between them was getting closer and closer, Fu Yunting's heart trembled. What was going on? Could it be that there was really a spy? Just now, the virtuous king was not probing, but forcing him to accept the challenge? If that was really the case, then he could only fight to the death. His heart had already made a decision. Fu Yunting raised his hand, shook the reins, and sped up. However, at this time, the virtuous king reined in his horse. Since General Fu is not feeling well, then why don't we fight another day? Fu Yunting also reined in his horse in time. Wait until this marshal's body is better. Even if the virtuous king did not invite me, this marshal would still want to exchange pointers with the virtuous king. Fu Yunting held his weapon and cupped his hands, then pulled the reins and turned around. However, after he turned around, his expression became a little strange. In the Qiyuan army's formation, his original position had already been replaced by someone. At first glance, it was a person who did not seem to fit in with the surroundings. However, after a slight feeling, it was as if he had completely merged with the surroundings. The appearance of Jin Qinhuang made Fu Yunting a little unrealistic. Did Jin Qinhuang specially come to help him out? Well, forget about it. Li Hongyuan rode his horse over. He was not as slow as Fu Yunting was before. In a very short time, he had already reached Fu Yunting's side. He raised his chin at the virtuous king. The strongest in the Xiongnu army? That kind of arrogance, Fu Yunting could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. In any case, he suppressed it in the end. However, he roughly understood what kind of image Jin Qinhuang intended to show others. Whether it was the Xiongnu army or the generals on his side who did not know, this kind of appearance was indeed beneficial. This kind of completely brainless appearance, many things would not be connected to him. On his side, because there were few people who knew, then even if there were spies, they would not be able to get much valuable information from Huasa. This was because this direction was wrong from the beginning. Replying to the Wang Ye, this general does not know. Fu Yunting showed enough respect, but did not have the slightest bit of humility. He did not lack the bearing that a general should have. You are not the general of Qi Yuan, how could you not know? Li Hongyuan was very dissatisfied with his attitude. Wang Ye, the Xiongnu army is innumerable. The ones who fought with this general were only a few. Fu Yunting was not polite, as he pointed out Li Hongyuan's ignorance. Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Yunting with a somewhat sinister gaze. Fu Yunting lowered his eyebrows and restrained his gaze, but his expression was indifferent. It was clear that his respect for him was only because of the other party's identity. It had nothing to do with anything else. Since it is like this, you can scram back. Then, he pointed the spear in his hand at the virtuous king of the West Xiongnu. If you are the strongest of the Xiongnu, then stay. If you are not, then scram back. Call out the strongest for Benwang. The virtuous king was not angry. He even smiled warmly. However, in his heart, he was most likely evaluating Li Hongyuan. I wonder which Wang Ye of Qi Yuan it is? In fact, he already had a rough idea. After all, when the Emperor of Qi Yuan celebrated his birthday last year, the virtuous king also made arrangements for the people he sent to the capital of Qi Yuan. He paid a lot of attention to the good-looking Jin Wang Ye, who was favored by the emperor and had a bad temper. Don't talk nonsense. This is a battlefield. It is not a place for you to have a friendly conversation. Or is it that the battlefield is actually like this? Even if Benwang has not seen him, he is not easy to fool. Let's see who is the real deal. Otherwise, Li Hongyuan's eyes were full of hostility. Leave your head with Benwang. The Jin Wang Ye of Qi Yuan was arrogant and condescending. He had no power, but no one dared to provoke him. The virtuous king thought of the people who returned to the Xiongnu and evaluated this Wang Ye. Now that he saw the real person, he had more considerations in his heart. In that case, Wang Ye might as well wait for a moment. Whether it was because of his status or something else, the virtuous king would not easily make a move. The virtuous king turned around and said a few words in the Xiongnu language. Then, a burly man came over on a horse. Speaking of which, there was indeed a saying that went, "Enemies are destined to meet." Under the Xiongnu king there were left and right virtuous kings, left and right grain kings, left and right generals, left and right commandants, left and right great Donghu, left and right Marquis of Gudu, and so on. There were 48 banners of 10,000 cavalry. Of course, although the name was famous, the subordinates were not necessarily full. It was just like the Qi Yuan. And this person was the right general, a hardcore supporter of the virtuous king. In Li Hongyuan's previous life, he had fought with him. Li Hongyuan's martial arts in his previous life was certainly far inferior to the present. In that fight, he almost suffered a big loss. In this life, since he saw him in advance, then he would send him to the Yellow Springs in advance. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty edge. He did not care about the rules of the battlefield. In any case, he did not understand the rules now. He raised his spear and rushed forward on his horse. In the most direct collision of strength, Li Hongyuan still felt that his strength was slightly weaker. This could not be helped. He did not have the opponent's advantage, just like He Zhihai. However, even if this was the case, it did not mean that Li Hongyuan would lose. No one would stupidly use their weakness to attack the opponent's strength. On the contrary, after the first strike, the opponent's strength would be infinitely inflated. Clang, clang, clang. The weapons clashed, sparks flew everywhere. It looked like they were evenly matched. However, only those who were close to the battle, such as the virtuous king and Fu Yunting, knew that the more they fought, the more excited the right general of the West Xiongnu tribe became. The virtuous king knew that this was not good. Naturally, he did not want his number one general to fall here. He did not wait any longer and urged his horse to help. Fu Yunting was about to stop him, but Li Hongyuan suddenly changed his method of attack. He feinted with his spear, and then the cold light of the spearhead directly disintegrated the right general's head. Blood splattered, and gradually landed on the virtuous king's face. At that moment, the virtuous king was stunned. However, when the silver light flashed, he hurriedly turned his horse around and quickly retreated. Li Hongyuan did not chase after him. He just watched as the virtuous king fled. Then, with a thrust of his spear, he raised the head that was already full of filth and stared like a copper bell. The head was raised at an angle. Li Hongyuan was very disdainful. The strongest of the Xiongnu tribe? Oh, it's only so. The virtuous king escaped from the danger zone. When he turned around, he saw Li Hongyuan and the head. His eyes were about to split open. Then, the bugle call for both sides to fight sounded at the same time. The sound of killing shook the sky. Because of Li Hongyuan's actions, the morale of the Qi Yuan army could be said to have soared by more than 30%. Fu Yunting probably did not expect that the final result would be like this. However, at this time his mind was very clear. Thank you for today, Your Highness. It's just that swords have no eyes on the battlefield. Your Highness, please withdraw from the battlefield. Li Hongyuan glanced at him lightly. He was indeed not prepared to go to the battlefield. With a wave of his hand, the head accurately fell into Fu Yunting's arms. If this head was one of his own people, Fu Yunting would not dislike it. He would probably fall into endless grief. The problem was that it belonged to the enemy. No matter how he looked at it, it was very unpleasant. However, this was a head that could weaken the enemy and increase the morale of his own side. He could not just throw it away like this. However, the Xiongnu people had short hair. This head was shaved in the middle. It was really difficult to carry. Fu Yunting casually threw it out. With a wave of his spear, the short blade horizontally pierced the head. Fu Yunting followed Li Hongyuan and rode back. The two armies were getting closer and closer. Because the Xiongnu people had lost a great general, they were raging with anger. Furthermore, Fu Yunting and Li Hongyuan were not wearing armor. The virtuous king gestured and ordered a Xiongnu person to take out a strong bow. 2 arrows, xiao, pierced through the air. General, Your Highness, be careful. Li Hongyuan suddenly abandoned his horse and turned around. With a flick of his spear, the 2 arrows were cut off one after another. Li Hongyuan's upper body leaned forward, his spear slanted towards the sky. Using the mana under his feet, he rushed out like a cheetah. Evidently, Jin Qin Wang, who had originally lost interest in the upcoming battle, was provoked because of this arrow. He decided to let the spear in his hand continue to drink blood. Facing the ordinary Xiongnu soldiers, it was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. Wherever the spear went, it brought out endless amounts of blood. One by one, the Xiongnu soldiers fell to the ground. There was no need to check. There was absolutely no one alive. https://www.beacon.com/11/11807/1292266. HTML chapter error. Please click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.beacon.com. Beacon. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website. Beacon.com. Chapter 504. Li Hongyuan shook off the blood droplets on his spear. These ordinary soldiers were so afraid of him that they would stay as far away from him as possible. However, after killing so many of them, he would lose interest. Furthermore, no matter how capable a person was, how many people could he kill even if he was able to kill them all in one blow? Not only was it tiring, but the deterrent effect was also limited. Li Hongyuan turned his attention to the generals and consciously started to search for them. It was not difficult to find these people. As the saying goes, soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. The difference between generals and soldiers was very big. Under normal circumstances, due to the chaos, no one would have the time to search for these people. However, the King of Hell was too cruel. If he did not take the initiative to attack, he would become very idle. If he wanted to, he could probably do something like drinking tea among the pile of corpses. Li Hongyuan used the tip of his tongue to sweep the corner of his mouth. There seemed to be a drop of blood there. Li Hongyuan chose his target and was ready to attack. These generals wanted to escape as easily as the soldiers, but it was not that easy. This was because the people that Li Hongyuan chose all had opponents. If they suddenly turned around and ran after clashing weapons with their opponents, would they be courting death? Li Hongyuan was not embarrassed at all about attacking from the side and robbing others of their battle achievements. After all, he was just killing people. Li Hongyuan specifically chose to attack under such circumstances. In a very short period of time, he had already killed more than 3 Xiongnu generals. Naturally, every time a general was killed, the news would be publicized. His motive was obvious. From the beginning until now, the Xiongnu people had lost more than 10,000 men in just over an hour. This was definitely not normal for the valiant Xiongnu army. This was also far beyond King Virtuous Sage's initial expectations. However, the current situation was extremely unfavorable for the Xiongnu people. Based on their current morale, if they continued to fight, their losses would only increase. There would not be any improvement. King Virtuous Sage had no choice but to order a retreat. It was just that right now, for Qi Yuan, the situation was great. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Fu Yunting only briefly inspected the battlefield, then immediately gave the order to pursue. With this pursuit, they directly chased for 50 miles. Then, the Qi Yuan army set up camp. It could be said to be a great victory. And in this battle, it was clear that Jin Qinhuang had made great contributions, although to a certain extent, there was a lot of coincidence in it. Basically, even if it was replicated in the future, it should not achieve the same effect. However, the final result could not be denied. Therefore, even if this battle was over, there were still people excitedly discussing Jin Qinhuang's bravery. It's just that, it seemed that she hadn't seen Jin Qinhuang's figure at all. Wanting to take a look at this Wang Ye wasn't possible. Fortunately, it was confirmed that he had returned, and nothing unexpected had happened. Fu Yunting dragged his unwell body and quickly and steadily arranged the follow-up matters. Soon after, Fu Yunting received a report that the wounded from this battle had been properly settled. That's right, the rescue team formed by Jing Wan appeared for the first time today. It was also the first time that Jing Wan was so close to the front line. Although she couldn't see the specific situation, she could hear the continuous shouting. Just by listening to it, she could feel her body tensing up and she had to be on full alert. It was as if the enemy would appear beside her at any time. If she wasn't careful, she could be beheaded and die. At the same time, she also witnessed the rescue team's first operation with her own eyes. Their actions were swift and effective. They were busy but not disorderly. To be honest, compared to Jingwan's expectations, it was much better. In Jingwan's view, when the two sides were fighting, it would be enough if they could get to the side and save people. However, Jingwan had underestimated them. Because this group of people were not ordinary people. Not to say that they were well trained, but at least they were veterans who had shuttled through the foul winds and bloody rain many times. They carried with them not only first aid items, stretchers and other things, but also murder weapons that could be used at any time. Perhaps because she hadn't witnessed the scene, Jingwan could still be considered calm. Looking at all the things they had prepared, she finally knew that these were actually Gong Jiu's handiwork. It seemed that there was nothing strange about it. In the end, Gong Zhou was born as a shadow guard. No matter how much he changed, his ferocity could not be ignored. Jingwan looked at those small and convenient weapons and suddenly thought of something. That was the tri-edge bayonet that was rumored to be a little evil in her previous life. That thing, Jingwan definitely had not come into contact with it. Most of the information she had about it came from hearsay and the internet. However, it seemed that it was internationally certified as the most poisonous bayonet. It was banned and was only used for ceremonial performances. Its design was mainly for stabbing and bleeding. Common weapons such as slashing, picking and cutting were usually weaker. After piercing into a person's body, air would be quickly drawn in through the blood groove. The air would form a large amount of bubbles in the body, blocking the blood vessels. As long as the bayonet pierced about 8 centimeters into any part of the body, it would be able to kill the enemy immediately. Moreover, the bayonet could be pulled out effortlessly in the body cavity where negative pressure was eliminated. It seemed that a certain amount of arsenic was added during the smelting process due to the nature of the metal. When the surface of the bayonet was worn off on the battlefield, the steel body containing arsenic was exposed. Even if the bayonet only scratched the enemy's skin, it would be very difficult to heal. This led to the legend that the bayonet had been soaked in poison. However, it was different now. With a little modification, it could be directly soaked in poison and no one would question it. Therefore, when the tri-edge bayonet was in the hands of her lord husband and then passed through Gong Zhou's hands, it might really be able to reach the legendary level and become an excellent weapon. Although, to some extent, it might be more suitable for shadow gods to use. Because she couldn't get involved, they also didn't allow her to get involved. Allowing her to stand here was already the limit of their tolerance. Jingwan naturally stood obediently at the side and didn't easily go forward to disturb them. Even if she discovered something wrong, she would only remember it in her heart. Speaking of which, if she didn't need someone to protect Jingwan at all times, Jingwan feared that she wouldn't even stay here. After all, if she didn't need protection, then there would be more people who could free up their hands to help. She would be a burden here. However, Jin Qin Wang had a rigid rule that no one could resist. Therefore, no matter where she was, she needed to occupy a portion of the manpower. Before Li Hongyuan came back, these people had been busy, and Jingwan had been standing at the side like a wooden stake. Looking at the wounded people, either missing an arm or a leg, or covered in blood, there were those who were lying on the stretcher and probably only had a breath left. Even if they did so much effort, there would still be countless lives that would fade away. At this moment, Jingwan's heart was surprisingly indifferent. It was as if she had seen too much and became indifferent. "What are you thinking about?" Li Hongyuan's hand gently rubbed her face. Jingwan was startled and came back to her senses. After half a beat, she revealed a shallow smile. "You're back." As if she didn't notice the bloodstains on Li Hongyuan's body and the murderous aura that hadn't completely faded away. Jingwan's startled appearance was too obvious. It was impossible to ignore. It was reasonable to say that in such an environment, it shouldn't be like this. "Wan, what are you thinking about so deeply?" After all, it was the first time that Li Hongyuan had encountered such a scene. He was a little worried that Jingwan wouldn't be able to bear it. Even when he saw her in his previous life, she was so fearless, courageous, and tenacious. After all, that was tempered by wind and frost. No one was born to adapt to such a scene. "It's nothing." In fact, Jingwan really wasn't thinking about anything. She was in a daze. Perhaps her mind was blank. Then, she belatedly realized that something was wrong with Li Hongyuan's body. "Your Highness, you've sent Buddha to the West?" "Some people are looking for death. It's rare for your husband to do a good deed and send them on their way. If they heard you say that, those who died at your hands would cry." But this had nothing to do with Jingwan. "Are you hurt?" She pulled him over and looked at him from head to toe. She wasn't sure if the blood on his body was his or someone else's. But after a closer look, where the blood stains were, his clothes didn't seem to be damaged. "Don't worry. I'm not hurt. There's not even a scratch." Jingwan sighed and nodded. Although she knew that his martial arts skills were outstanding and that he had rich experience on the battlefield, it was a war. Thousands of years passed in the blink of an eye. Moreover, it was never a place to show off one's heroism. Therefore, as long as he didn't return safely, her heart would be in the air. Go back. Because Jingwan knew what he had done, she didn't restrain some of the frightening things about her. And Jingwan didn't treat him strangely. Regarding this, Li Hongyuan was quite happy. But after all, it made people feel uncomfortable, whether it was Wan or himself. Therefore, it was necessary to freshen up and change clothes as soon as possible. Jingwan nodded and took the initiative to hold Li Hongyuan's hand. Li Hongyuan's eyes moved slightly. His wife seemed to be a little clingy today. If it was in the past, when there were outsiders, she wouldn't act so intimately. Even if he wanted to be closer, she might smile and avoid him. Li Hongyuan calmly returned her hand and led her away. Jingwan followed closely behind, appearing very quiet. At this point, if he still said that he was fine, then Li Hongyuan, as a husband, would be a waste. However, Li Hongyuan could roughly guess the reason for Jingwan's current state. In the end, it was because it was her first time. Li Hongyuan wanted to hold up the sky for Jingwan. He wanted her to live a carefree life. However, from time to time, he let Jingwan experience things that ordinary people couldn't bear. It seemed very contradictory, but if one thought about it carefully, it didn't seem difficult to explain. After all, Li Hongyuan himself was different. He was also very clear that Jingwan was not a daughter flower that could accompany a lifetime. Like Jingwan, he also wanted her to walk side by side with him. Therefore, when Jingwan wanted to learn more and come into contact with more things, he didn't hesitate to give all his support and help. He didn't completely hide anything from her and completely raised her like a canary, not knowing the slightest bit of danger. In terms of feelings, and towards this person, he had an absolute possessiveness. In addition, he didn't create a narrow cage, but opened up an endless battlefield for her to use and gallop freely. As for Jingwan's current situation, Li Hongyuan couldn't very well persuade her with words. He simply didn't do anything useless. The plan to go back was temporarily put on hold, and he brought her around casually. The place they were at now wasn't far from the Qi Yuan's camp. It felt like it was just on the side. At this time, there weren't people busy shuttling back and forth, because they had received Fu Yunting's order to break camp and move forward 50 miles. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan directly into the camp. Fortunately, the first person they met was the one who had seen Li Hongyuan at the beginning. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter at all. When they saw this living ancestor, they naturally didn't dare to say anything. Although he didn't participate in the previous battle, it didn't mean that he didn't hear any news. Didn't he see that this person was still covered in blood? He didn't know what the other party was going to do, but he was also worried that there would be comrades who didn't recognize Jin Qinhuang that would cause unnecessary trouble for him. Therefore, he could only brace himself and follow. In the end, he was his own country's Qinhuang, and with his performance on the battlefield, it could be assumed that he absolutely wouldn't do anything that would harm the Qi Yuan. Li Hongyuan's speed was relatively slow. He just walked quietly and didn't speak. A place like the military camp, for a woman, was an absolute forbidden area. Jingwan believed that if she wasn't brought by Li Hongyuan, perhaps she would never be able to set foot in this place. She was completely unfamiliar with it, so naturally, she would be filled with curiosity. Of course, as far as the eye could see, there were large and small tents that were being deftly dismantled by the logistics personnel. Unknowingly, Jingwan was led by Li Hongyuan to the front of the largest tent. They were stopped by the soldiers who had been guarding the front of the tent. They also knew this living king of hell, but no one knew what important things were inside the commander-in-chief's tent. The commander-in-chief wasn't there, so naturally, they couldn't easily set foot in it. Therefore, they could only brace themselves and stop them. Get lost. Li Hongyuan didn't restrain his terrifying aura. Jingwan wasn't affected, but it didn't mean that others could be unperturbed. Being stared at by him without any emotion, they only felt a chill run up from the bottom of their feet. Their whole body stiffened, and their willpower was greatly challenged. It seemed that if he continued to stare, no matter who it was, they would choose to unconditionally submit. Jingwan pulled Li Hongyuan and advised, "Wang Yi, they are also loyal to their duty. Don't make things difficult for them. It's already inappropriate for us to enter the military camp without permission." After that, she realized that they were still holding hands. She forced herself to be calm and tried to pull her hand away. Unfortunately, she didn't succeed and could only give up. If they opened the door for anyone who oppressed them, wouldn't everything be a mess? Wang Yi should be lucky to have such loyal people. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan from behind. The way he looked at the two soldiers didn't seem to be any different. Jingwan wasn't the least bit afraid. Instead, she laughed. "This should be General Fu's tent, General Fu." Hearing Jingwan's words, Li Hongyuan's face instantly darkened. He pulled Jingwan away. Following behind Li Hongyuan, Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed unkindly. Digression. https://www.bicon.com/11/11807/129599633. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicon.com. Bicon.com Mobile Edition. Chapter 505. Following behind Li Hongyuan, Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed somewhat unkindly. But that was it. She didn't mention Fu Yunting anymore for fear that it would agitate someone and cause trouble for Fu Yunting. Speaking of which, Fu Yunting was innocent and was originally targeted by Jin Qinhuang for no reason. She was deliberately using him to agitate someone. That would be too tragic. Moreover, at that time, the one who would be miserable would not only be Fu Yunting, but most likely, she would also be. However, with such a small episode, looking at Jingwan's current appearance, that invisible influence seemed to have weakened a lot. They continued to stroll around the military camp. The military camp had to accommodate tens of thousands of people, including eating, sleeping, training, and so on. It could be imagined that the area of the entire camp would be quite considerable. Li Hongyuan led Jingwan and talked about some things. From time to time, he would introduce the various layout of the camp to Jingwan, what the positions were, what they were used for. He was quite familiar with all of these. Without getting close, he could immediately say 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, and so on. But according to his picky temperament and his dislike of Fu Yunting, the living king of hell would nitpick the entire way, where there was something wrong, where there was something not done well. Jingwan found it funny and nodded her head in a deadpan manner. This man's indifferent tone was picky and his serious face was narrow-minded. Those who didn't know might think that Jin Qinhuang was very powerful. She had noticed all these details and must remember them. Next time, she couldn't make the same mistake. For example, the soldier who had been following them. But, wasn't the other party just a Qinhuang? How could he know so much about the things in the camp? It must be known that in Qi Yuan, it wasn't that there hadn't been a special case of a prince holding military power, but it was under special circumstances. Once the army returned to the court, the military power would be handed over immediately. And this Wang Ye, logically speaking, should not know about the layout of the camp. These were things that he shouldn't be in contact with, but he was familiar with them and casually spoke about them. It was frightening to think about. The accompanying soldier quickly threw away the thoughts in his mind. There were some things that he could not even think about. In any case, he was just a small pawn. What did the people in the capital have to do with him? As for Jingwan, who knew her husband's temperament very well, she was delighted to know his true feelings. However, Jingwan still learned a lot from Li Hongyuan's narration. It could be said that she had gained a lot of knowledge and broadened her horizons. Unknowingly, a trace of pride and a certain kind of feeling had arisen in her. Half of the base of the camp had been removed, and most of the tents should be dismantled. After that, Li Hongyuan asked someone to bring his precious horse over and took Jingwan to a nearby mountain at a moderate speed. Although it was not particularly high, it was enough for them to see the entire battlefield. At this moment, the battlefield was still being cleaned up. Although those people, whether they were lying on the ground or standing up to drag the corpses, were very small, like a small black, and the visual impact was not big, but the sensitivity of their senses seemed to have increased by a few hundred times, and a very austere and cruel aura came rushing towards them. Jingwan shivered. She didn't know if it was because of the cold or because she was affected by it. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan into his arms, as if he wanted to dispel the chill for Jingwan. Only when you are strong enough to make others fear you can be at peace. Jingwan understood what he was talking about, so she said, I know all about it. Then, the two of them tacitly stopped talking. They hugged each other quietly and looked into the distance. That day, that mountain, that battlefield. After an unknown amount of time, Jingwan reached out and poked Li Hongyuan. Yuan, you smell so bad. Hurry up and go back. Why don't you wash a few more times to wash away the smell on your body? You can sleep in another room tonight. Li Hongyuan looked down at Jingwan, whose expression of disdain was particularly obvious on her face, and laughed silently. When they went back, they did not suppress their speed, so they were very fast. Because Li Hongyuan was around, Jingwan did not need so many people to guard her. Therefore, they left as many people as possible to treat the wounded. Jingwan could not help, so she could only temporarily suppress the matter in her heart. She would go to see the specific situation tomorrow and understand the casualties at the same time. However, after arriving in the northwest, the number of times the husband and wife were intimate had decreased. It should be known that during every ceremony, Li Hongyuan was mostly in control of the initiative. Now, he seemed to be consciously reducing the number of times. At night, they only hugged each other to sleep. They did not do the most intimate things, but their hearts were connected in the most intimate way. The next day, Jingwan hurried to the wounded barracks after breakfast. The wounded from yesterday should have all been relieved. As the number of wounded soldiers in the barracks increased, Jingwan felt that she should be able to do something more. Li Hongyuan did not follow this time. After this battle, it was clear that he still needed to do some things. Although the plan to deal with the West Xiongnu virtuous prince had already slowly unfolded, this kind of matter still needed a period of time to ferment. However, it did not mean that the living king of hell had nothing to do. Fu Yunting's current broken body naturally had to rely on Li Hongyuan's support. Of course, it was not to make up for his own mistakes, but merely that he did not want his plan to be dragged down by Fu Yunting. Fu Yunting, who was shot while lying down, only felt even more pain on his body when he saw Jin Qinwang. Digression: https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/13002428. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website. Bicken.com. Chapter 506. When facing the wounded again, Jingwan no longer had the indescribable emotions she had yesterday. She appeared more calm and composed. Even if she could not do anything personally, she could still comfort people at the appropriate time. It could be said that she had reached a high level of agreement with her husband on some matters. Jingwan felt that she could still do something. It was better to have psychological counseling for people who had experienced war and even been on the verge of death. However, it was obvious that Jingwan was not good at it. Perhaps she could cultivate some such people first. Although there was no systematic way to learn it, the earliest psychologists probably figured it out by themselves. She could let them complete this career in the future. Psychological counseling could not be done, but it was still possible to let these people relax in a proper way. Of course, it was not only that. She could also instill some ideas of loyalty to the country in them, and at the same time, give them some chicken soup for the soul or something. Then, she would carry out an unusual sympathy performance first. At present, there were only a few things that could be put on the stage for people to see. There were even fewer things that were suitable to appear here. Therefore, she had to find some new tricks. Jingwan felt that she could write some positive and brainwashing picture books, and then let people change it into operas and put it on the stage. In short, she wanted to give them hope and courage, let them live well now, and let them risk their lives to protect their family and country in the future. After walking around for a while, Jingwan decided to go back and write. She should be able to write a lot of this kind of thing. Jingwan was thinking as she walked. She inadvertently looked up and glanced at the entrance of the alley in front of her. Someone was looking at them, but after seeing Jingwan look over, he stepped back. He did not panic, nor was he sneaky. The distance was a little far, so Jing Dan did not see the other person's face clearly. Therefore, she did not take it to heart. After all, there were many people coming and going here, and there was no lack of people who secretly looked at them. Jingwan continued to walk forward. At a fork in the road, she paused and turned in another direction. The person beside her did not ask. He just followed quietly and kept to his duty. There were not many people who knew how to suture now. Even if Gong Jiu was willing to teach them, not every doctor could accept it. Compared to other people, Gong Jiu's skills were still the most pure. Therefore, after the war, he was also the busiest. It seemed that he had not rested since yesterday. Even if it was just the simplest suture of a wound, there were many things that needed attention. However, Jingwan did not enter Gong Jiu's operating room. If she did, she would know that Gong Jiu did not just suture. His courage and some of his ideas were very bold. Although she was a little worried about Gong Jiu's health, Jingwan just stood outside and did not go in to disturb him. Seeing that Gong Jiu hadn't come out for a long time, he didn't want to go anywhere else for a while. He only left someone to wait for Gong Jiu to come out and let him go back to rest. Not having a good rest would have a great impact on a person. Even if she knew that Gong Jiu used to be a secret guard and had undergone special training, even if he stayed up for a few days and nights, he would probably not make any mistakes. However, it did not mean that there would be no problems. Gong Jiu was only here to help because of her orders. Gong Jiu was extremely important to the prince's residence and her husband. Therefore, nothing could happen to him. When she went back, she did not see Li Hongyuan. Regarding this, Jingwan was not surprised. She went directly to the study because she already had an idea. She borrowed some stories from her previous life and adapted them. Then, she added things that matched the background and history of this world. She picked up the brush and started writing. Her speed was not slow. The more she wrote, the more inspiration she seemed to have. It was as if she could not stop at all. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan came back, he saw a similar scene again. This time, he did not look at her quietly. Instead, he alerted Jingwan at once. Jingwan looked up at him. "You're back." Then, she lowered her head and wrote more than 10 words. She stopped writing, picked up the paper and blew on it. "Ah Yuan, take a look. What do you think?" She handed a stack of paper to Li Hongyuan as if she was presenting a treasure. Li Hongyuan flipped open the paper while listening to Jingwan's idea. Looking at the story written on the paper, in the eyes of people like Li Hongyuan, it was simply a bluff. However, if the ordinary soldiers were to read it, it would be a completely different matter. Li Hongyuan had to admit that if these things were read by the soldiers, their blood-boiling awareness would soar at least several times. After all, those people were ordinary people. They were illiterate and did not know any great principles. They were easily led by others. Wan, in the past, those in power should be very good at buying people's hearts, right? Jingwan spat softly at him. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Hongyuan smiled but did not say anything. The topic ended there. "Hurry up and write a letter to the capital. Ask the prince's opera troupe to come over. There are opera troupes in the capital as well. Why do you want to go to the farthest place? Because I want to watch a play and listen to music. The opera troupe here can't meet my requirements. What's wrong with that? Li Hongyuan smiled ambiguously. In an instant, Jingwan understood. TSK. That was why this man was able to make use of everything reasonably. Digression. https://www.bicken. com/11/11807/13002431. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Bicken. Com mobile version reading website. Bicken.com. Chapter 507. In an instant, Jingwan understood. TSK. That was why this man was able to make use of everything reasonably. There was nothing wrong with it. If the King of Hell wanted it, she had to do it. Anyway, Jingwan was more familiar with the people in the prince's mansion. Moreover, it was not the first time that they had followed Jingwan's request to rehearse a play. So, there was no problem. However, it would take some time for so many people to come over. Therefore, during this period, she still needed the opera troupe from the prefectural city. Of course, there were also those who played. In short, the purpose was to make people relax. It was not to use soft words to lure people into the village of gentleness and weaken their willpower. It had to be positive. With such a plan and with someone's agreement, Jingwan did not hesitate and did as she said. Therefore, when the wounded soldiers' camp started to set up the stage, many people were puzzled. What was she going to do? The soldiers who lived at the bottom of society were always the most numerous. Most of them were born in poverty. Perhaps they had only heard of opera but had never seen it before. Therefore, it was very normal for them to not understand it for a while. However, it did not mean that everyone here was not knowledgeable. Therefore, it was normal for them to be seen through in one sentence. Therefore, many people were excited and looked forward to it. The list of the opera was prepared at the mention of it. It was still the same, meaning that the audience could choose whatever they wanted. It was something that they had practiced more than once. Of course, they could choose whatever they wanted. Although she did not have much contact with it in this world, in her previous life, her father was a jerk. However, Jingwan more or less learned something from him. She did not use it much in the past. Now, she was a little unfamiliar with it, but it was enough for these people. He was destined to do certain things in the future, and certain methods were necessary. Therefore, it was natural for him to start practicing now. The people on the stage were immersed in singing. The people below the stage were watching enthusiastically. No matter whether they understood it or not, they were clapping and cheering together. They were so excited that they seemed to have forgotten the pain on their bodies. Jingwan sat near a corner and unconsciously flicked her fingernails. This was the result she wanted. Then, she tilted her head. Well, she was probably a little more presentable now. Well, she wasn't very sure. She didn't seem to have any special feelings in her heart. So, when a person made up their mind to change, it was actually quite easy. In fact, in her previous life, because of her scumbag father, there was a period of time when she was a little disgusted with people who worked in politics. However, before this kind of feeling could reach its end, she was pulled back by her grandmother. Everything could not be generalized, and one could not judge everyone with one stroke. However, even so, she still felt a little repulsed at the bottom of her heart. Fortunately, after coming to this world, she was a little baby in her mother's womb who had not yet fully grown. This gave her enough time to adapt, so she would not show any repulsion towards being born in a family of officials. Thinking about it, her grandmother was a smart person. If she really had that kind of feeling, she was afraid that it would be very easy for her to detect it. She did not know when that kind of feeling had completely disappeared. Many times, she felt lucky that she did not have to struggle at the bottom. It was not that she was afraid of hardships, but the oppression of class could make it difficult for her to breathe. Of course, she was even luckier to have such a family. Although it was not satisfactory in every aspect, Jingwan was content. Needless to say, after she had interacted with a certain man, God had always been kind to her. And now, she had walked on this road. Her heart seemed to be quite calm. When Jingwan retracted her gaze, she inadvertently noticed a person. The other party seemed to have discovered that she was looking at him and gave her a salute. Jingwan felt that the other party was inexplicably familiar, as if she had seen him before. She wanted to take a closer look to identify him, but the other party had already turned his head and there was another burst of ear-splitting cheers. Jingwan glanced at the stage. The two martial artists were fighting fiercely, accompanied by the clanging sounds of gongs and drums. It could be said that it was quite interesting. Well, she knew that in the eyes of these soldiers, this kind of scene should be much more exciting than those babbling sounds. Jingwan retracted her gaze and looked at the direction just now. The person who seemed to be very eye-catching just now seemed to have merged with the others. She could not distinguish who was who. The distance between the frontmost barracks and the prefectural city was getting farther and farther. This was actually a good thing. Jin Qinhuang's special request was not a particularly difficult matter. Lu Chengdi naturally had to satisfy it. What's more, he also wanted his son to do things for him. However, compared to last year when he went to Jiangnan, this time, Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen sent him letters more frequently. It could be seen that he was more vigilant against his son who was placed on the battlefield. Unfortunately, to a certain extent, he was a blind man. Jin Qinhuang wanted his own Fu's theatrical troupe. Obviously, he was severely impeached again. Then, the theatrical troupe that arrived in the northwest was not only those from the Prince's Fu. Several of the more famous theatrical troupes in the capital were also packed. Jingwan coldly pulled the corner of her mouth. This emperor, what did he want to do? Digression. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/13037232. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book. www.bicken.com. Bicken.com mobile version reading website. Bicken.com. Chapter 508. Jingwan coldly tugged at the corner of her mouth. This emperor, what exactly did he want to do? But it didn't matter. Since these people were packed up, naturally they would make the best use of them. Regardless of how many of these people had problems or had ulterior motives, as long as these people were watched, they were not allowed to take a step out of the prescribed area, they were not allowed to casually contact other people. Once they disobeyed, they would be dealt with as spies. In any case, it was after the war, they could easily find a reason. Thus, they did not believe that they could still cause any trouble. After these people arrived, they were personally received by Jingwan. They only needed a head ornament, their clothes were almost plain, and a simple chair was placed there to sit. There was a square table by the side with a cup of tea. Jingwan put one hand on the armrest, her expression indifferent. Behind her stood a gong mama. It was originally an ordinary scene, but it made these people who were standing tense for no reason, not daring to slack off. Gong mama methodically explained a lot of rules to them. Do you all understand? These rules were stricter than entering the Wang Fu's courtyard in the capital. As a famous theatrical troupe, they were somewhat indignant. They were not criminals, but seeing the seemingly indifferent Jin Wang Fei, they did not dare to be rash and agreed one after another. In contrast, the people of Jin Wang Fu were very calm. These rules were similar to when they were in the Wang Fu. Jingwan's fingertips lightly tapped on the armrest of the chair. The fingernails and the wooden fingertips made a slight sound. Just this sound attracted everyone's attention. There are some ugly words that this Wang Fei will say first. If these rules are violated, you must be prepared to stay in the military camp forever. As for what kind of method you will stay, this Wang Fei believes that everyone is well aware that it is probably not what you want. They were all entertainers and belonged to the lowly category. Even if they were men, when they arrived at the military camp, they would not be soldiers. There was only one type: prostitutes. As the saying goes, after 2 or 3 years of being a soldier, a sow is more beautiful than a cicada. The things that were bred in the military camp were definitely more than what outsiders could imagine. Due to various reasons, it seemed quite normal for them to comfort each other. Those who were thrown into the military camp by the princess consort's order, needless to say, were women. The men would also have to play the flute every night. When that time came, who would be afraid of men and women? Although there were some men who, due to some reasons, were submissive like child molesters, it did not mean that these men were willing to be part of the military prostitutes. In the military prostitutes' camp, they might not even be comparable to those in the lowest class brothels. To put it bluntly, if you wanted to sleep with those people, you would have to spend some money. As for the military prostitutes, they might not even have the chance to take a breather. There was no other way. There were too many soldiers. Therefore, when they heard the meaning behind Jingwan's words, they all kept quiet out of fear. Even if they really had any ulterior motives, they would probably have to reconsider at this time. However, it seemed that they had to change their understanding of the princess consort. Jing did not care at all what they thought in their hearts. After giving them a warning, she got up and walked away leisurely. However, her words were definitely not a joke. If someone dared to commit a crime knowingly, then he would definitely not have a good ending. Her sympathy for the innocent was getting weaker and weaker, let alone those who had committed a crime and deserved it. After this matter was handed over, Jingwan did not ask any more questions. What she wanted to see was the final result. It was probably because they had nothing to do, or perhaps they wanted to perform well in front of the princess consort, or perhaps the troop that belonged to the Wangfu wanted to compete with those outside. After all, if they were raised by the family, they would appear to be useless if they were compared to those outside. How would they be able to defend their own position? And those outside were the most famous in the capital and had experienced trials and hardships. If they were raised by the family, where would their face go? Thus, with this kind of competitive mentality, they quickly produced results. When they produced results, those in the wounded barracks naturally had good fortune. Thus, these people knew that they came to this dangerous place not to relieve Jin Qinhuang and Princess Consort's boredom. However, Jin Qinhuang's orders were placed there. There was no room for them to interfere. Therefore, no matter what they thought in their hearts, they had to obediently continue to sing. Of course, towards the end, it was not only to sing in the wounded barracks, the soldiers at the front should also properly enjoy the benefits. Just like this, another month passed in a hurry and another year was approaching. It was cold enough, but fortunately, it did not snow in this area. However, from the information that Jingwan received, it was indeed as a certain person had said. A large area of the north was covered in snow and it was a rare snowstorm. Sure enough, people could change and this heavenly power was still the same as before. Speaking of which, Prince Rue's son had already been born. It could only be said that Prince Rue really did not have a son. Princess Consort Rue's third child was still a girl. It was obvious that she would definitely make a boy. Jingwan wanted to ask where this boy came from. A certain person definitely knew, but he just smiled and did not speak. Jingwan looked at it. It was definitely not the child that Prince Rue had originally prepared. Its origin was most likely not simple and it was clearly the rhythm of something big. The war was still in a deadlock. The West Hun tribe's virtuous king did not advance. Or rather, he did not have the strength to advance, but he still stubbornly defended the territory that he had seized and did not yield an inch. In the capital, Lu Qingdi was clearly anxious and gave Li Suyen orders more than once. Li Hongyuan knocked on the map in front of him. It's time to close the net. Digression. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/13082853. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Biku Gur mobile reading website: bicken.com. Chapter 509. Li Hongyuan knocked on the map in front of him. It's time to pull in the net. Is Yuan preparing to end the war ahead of time? Jingwan asked. The so-called ahead of time, naturally compared to his past life, there was still a gap of several months. But it's naturally a good thing to be able to end it ahead of time. War is not a good thing in the first place. It's a waste of resources and lives. If it's not necessary, no one would be willing to delay it for 2 days. Jingwan looked at the map that was clearly divided into 2 parts. Even if it can be brought forward, it shouldn't be over in 1 or 2 days. It's not impossible to immediately stop the war, but it's a bit difficult and not what this husband wants. Jingwan pondered for a moment and understood. As long as one side surrenders, then the war will immediately stop. However, it's impossible to make Qi Yuan surrender, and the West Han tribe's virtuous prince obviously wouldn't do such a thing easily. Even if his brain was flooded with water, Jin Qin Wang would be able to open it up and let the water out. After this matter is over, will His Majesty be so angry that something bad will happen to him? Jingwan was a little worried. Li Hongyuan sneered, "Don't talk about being angry. Even if he dies from anger, it doesn't matter. It saves me the trouble of doing it myself." Jingwan was silent. In his past life, he personally chopped up his own father. In the eyes of the world, that was absolutely inhumane, intolerable, and worse than a beast. The reason he became a tyrant was not without these bloody and cruel methods before ascending the throne. According to your current arrangement, the Northwest Army will certainly not lose more than 200,000 people for nothing. I'm also fine. So, even if that man is very, very annoying, it's fine if you usurp the throne, but at least keep him alive. Jingwan knows he doesn't care about his reputation, but in the end, Jingwan doesn't want him to have a bad reputation for 1,000 years. At present, filial piety is the rule of the world. Children are the same as their parents' private property. As the saying goes, there are no parents without fault. So, no matter what they do to their children, even if it's excessive, people will only say a few words. But if it's the other way around, they will be accused of being unfilial. Most people are like this, not to mention the emperor. Even if the emperor killed his own son in broad daylight, no one would dare to say anything. Even if it's an eternal ruler, once tainted with a stain, generations of descendants will criticize him. How could Li Hongyuan not understand Jingwan's meaning? In fact, at the beginning of his return, he was used to being reckless in his past life. It took him a lot of effort to suppress the killing intent in his heart. After so many years, his killing intent has faded. At least on the surface, he can face the so-called emperor calmly. But in the end, Li Hongyuan really hasn't thought about how to deal with him. He probably just wants to wait until the end. Maybe it's all up to his mood when the time comes. But one thing is for sure, and that is, he never thought about feeding him well. But if it's just keeping him alive, it's not impossible to consider. Li Hongyuan reached out and touched Jingwan's cheek. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." To be honest, with his body, even if we keep him alive, how many more years can he live? Jingwan held Li Hongyuan's hand. "So, I don't want you to repeat the mistakes of the past. Moreover, if this person dies, everything will be over. If he lives, he may be able to atone for his wrongdoings." You expect a person like him to atone for his sins? Wan, are you being silly again? Moreover, how are you going to let him atone for his sins? Jingwan was speechless. Keeping him alive means that he is the retired emperor in name. What do you want him to do? Fool, There are many ways to kill someone. It's not necessary to kill him with a knife. If you want him to die quickly, you can die quickly. If you want him to die slowly, you can die slowly. Maybe it's painful, or maybe it's easier. There are at least 80 ways to do it. So, don't think about these silly questions. People are not smart. The more you think, the more foolish you become. This was not the first time that Jing Wan had been called silly. She was almost immune to it now and rolled her eyes at him. However, since this was the case, there was no need to continue talking about this matter. It was rather boring. Because the plan was being carried out step by step, Jing Wan also became nervous. She stopped asking about the casualty barracks, and followed Li Hongyuan to read the secret letters that came and went. Earlier on, the weapons and armor that Li Hongyuan secretly forged were all shipped to the northwest in batches. Some were concealed, some were not. The reason why he was so brazen was that the entire northwest was now under his control. At the same time, it also showed that Li Hongyuan was increasingly unconcerned about whether his own affairs would be exposed. And now, the Western Han tribe's great sage king was also badly battered. Speaking of which, he was called the Great Sage King. In fact, he was not one of the two great sage kings under the Western Han tribe king. Speaking of which, he was only the Western Han tribe king's brother. The other great sage king was their elder. Moreover, there were also the Western Han tribe king's sons. As the great sage king's reputation became more and more resounding, how could people not be afraid of him? Even the Western Han tribe king who once trusted him was increasingly shaken under the various slanderous attacks from various parties. Now, what he needed was an opportunity. And this opportunity, Li Hongyuan would soon deliver it to his hands. As for Lu Qingdi, he was bound to give some benefits. Li Hongyuan had to cooperate in order to let Li Suyen complete her task. Everything was ready and waiting for Jin Qinhuang's order. Wang Ye, you asked us to pay attention to Su Mingzhang's whereabouts a few days ago. It has now been confirmed. Digression. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/13082854. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website. Bicken.com. Chapter 510. Wang Ye, a few days ago, you asked me to pay attention to the whereabouts of Su Mingzhang, and now it has been confirmed. When everything was ready and the final plan could be implemented at any time, Fu Yunting brought news of someone who should have been almost forgotten. After a long while, Li Hongyuan indifferently responded, "Have you seen the person?" "Yes." Regarding the cold reception in front of Jin Qinhuang, Fu Yunting was already accustomed to it. If there was a time when Li Hongyuan was amiable towards him, then his nerves would truly be stretched taut. Therefore, no matter how long this lord ignored him, he could still respectfully stand there without the slightest negative emotion. Su Mingzhang's alias is Su Bufu. Even his figure has changed compared to the past. There are injuries on his face, some changes in his eyebrows, and his skin color is much darker. He looks like he comes from an ordinary background, has a good brain, and can recognize a few characters, but doesn't look like he has read much. To put it bluntly, Su Mingzhang was an elegant person with excellent cultivation and grace. Then, Su Bufu was a shrewd and ambitious rough man. If it wasn't for Li Hongyuan's early letter to let Fu Yunting pay attention, he would never have connected these two people with the difference between heaven and earth. Because of the reminder, he deliberately paid attention. Because of the deliberate attention, he discovered something that could not be erased. However, in a cautious manner, Fu Yunting still spent some time to confirm the other party's identity. After all, if he made a mistake, he was afraid that he would not be able to bear the consequences. Since he has already walked in front of you, it seems that he has shown a lot of talent. At the same time, he also has military achievements. So, help him again and let him make some more contributions. At least when the army returns to the court, let him become a member of the limelight. Since he wanted to climb back up with the fastest speed, Jin Qin expressed that he had the beauty to help him achieve his goal. Yes. Fu Yunting replied. Fu Yunting felt a little sorrow for Su Mingzhong in his heart. He was a criminal who had been sent to the border and would never be allowed to return to the capital. If he had been sent to the northwest, perhaps he could have said that it was fate, and he could have used meritorious service to atone for his crimes. Perhaps he would have been able to climb back up with dignity. However, the reality was the complete opposite. He was a criminal who had changed his identity and schemed. Then, no matter how much meritorious service he had, it would have been useless. Moreover, the current Northwest could be said to be Fu Yunting's, covering the sky with one hand. Regardless of whether Su Mingzhong's military exploits were real or fake, they would be able to make it sound fake. For example, they would be able to falsely claim military exploits, or use unscrupulous means to obtain military exploits. Moreover, they would be able to make it sound quite convincing. After all, Su Mingzhong had once been a scholar without the strength to truss up a chicken. He had never learned the art of war, nor had he read any military books. How could he have been reborn in such a short period of time? However, Fu Yunting currently did not have the leisure to sympathize with others. It was already good enough that he was able to preserve his own safety. Although the injuries on his body had already healed, but every time he saw Jin Qin, there would still be a pain that came from his bones. It was real pain and not a so-called illusion. Furthermore, once he left Jin Qin's line of sight and was not under the same roof, nothing would happen. As for the reason behind this, he himself did not know, and it was not enough for others to know. Therefore, if Jingwan knew that it was because of psychological factors that produced neuralgia, she would probably be speechless again. Of course, Su Mingzhong's real sorrow did not concern himself with this. When he clearly knew that the emperor did not like Fu Yunting, he still became Fu Yunting's right-hand general. Regardless of whether he was active or passive, he would definitely be on Lu Chengdi's blacklist. And as an insider, Su Mingzhong would definitely do something during this period of time. Then, it would be a ready-made handle. When the time came, it would be unknown who would be the one to collude with the enemy and commit treason. And step by step, Jin Qin, who had calculated all of this to death, as one of his own people, it made people's liver tremble. As someone who was completely kept in the dark by him, really, he did not know what kind of emotions he should express to them. However, because he himself was also quite miserable, hearing that there were many people who were more miserable than him, even if those people had no grievances or enmity with him, his heart still strangely gave birth to a sense of balance. Fu Yunting was too lazy to bother about whether his mentality was wrong or not. All right, get lost. Li Hongyuan indifferently said. This general will retire. Fu Yunting quickly got lost. However, Fu Yunting was very clear that there were some things that if he did not do well, Jin Qin would probably really fix him. At that time, it would not be so easy. Whatever Lu Chengdi wanted to do to him, the things that were not done, Jin Qin would probably have to do it on his behalf. And in Jin Qin's hands, there really was not even the slightest chance. Therefore, Fu Yunting was very clear that he absolutely could not make the slightest mistake. He had to be 120% alert at any time and place. Before the dust settled, he absolutely could not relax. Even if the overall situation was set, he had to be cautious and even more cautious when dealing with Jin Qin. He must not be careless and provoke the other party. He did not want to die, and even more so, did not want to implicate his family. Among the commander-in-chief who held hundreds of thousands of military power, to be honest, there was probably not one who was as sullen as Fu Yunting. Those people, if they really had some kind of ambition, even if they did not usurp the throne, to a certain extent, they could still wrestle with the person on the throne. Perhaps he did not fear Lu Chengdi, because Lu Chengdi was someone who was played in the palm of his hand by the person he feared. Let's not mention how badly the Western Xiong tribe's virtuous prince was under pressure. Let's not mention how the Western Xiong tribe's internal strife was also not mentioned. Let's talk about how Lu Chengdi was approaching the end of the year. Under normal circumstances, he should have already retired. However, because of the war, this year was the same as last year. No one stopped working, and at this time, Lu Chengdi and the entire court suddenly received news that Jin Qinhuang and his entourage, including Jin Qinhuang's consort Luo Jingwan, Yu Zhongqing, blackguard Li Suyen, and so on, had all disappeared. That was not all. Afterwards, all connections between the Northwest and the court were also completely cut off at the same time. No one knew what was going on over there. Jin Qinhuang's disappearance was simply the last piece of news deliberately released by the other party. Lu Chengdi agreed with Li Suyen's suggestion to make use of his son. However, this kind of completely uncontrollable situation was absolutely not what he wanted to see. That was the son he cared about the most, the son born from the love of his life. Now, the ritual had been completed. He did not know what the final result would be. He could not wait to see her. However, after the ritual, Great Master Liaochen temporarily refused to see guests. He, the emperor, was no exception. Now that his son was missing, if he could see her, what would he say to her? Lu Chengdi's anger soared to an unprecedented height. This time he was not so lucky. Still full of energy, he directly vomited blood and even fell into a short coma. This was in front of many people. Even if he wanted to hide it, it could not be hidden. For a time, many people were panicking. Fortunately, because of the short duration, the panic was soon suppressed. However, this situation was like a warning, or a sign. It was deeply rooted in some people's hearts. It was like a seed had taken root and sprouted, and the bottom of their hearts was restless. After Lu Chengdi woke up, he immediately sent people to the northwest. No matter what, he had to find out what was going on. Dying together with this, without hesitation, he directly gave the order to imprison everyone in Wu and Marquis Fu. After all, there was nothing much to say this time. If it wasn't for Fu Yunting's problem, it wouldn't have been that after Jin Qinhuang went missing, even the news from the northwest would not have been cut off. Lu Chengdi's heart was filled with deep hatred. Fu Yunting actually rebelled. However, at this time, Lu Chengdi was still rational. He detained the people in Wu Anho's residence and did not touch them. After all, his beloved son might be in the hands of the other party. He was afraid that if he touched the people in Wu Anho's residence, his son would also suffer. And when the situation was unclear, it was impossible to send troops to suppress them. So, he could only wait. Waiting in the unknown was the most anxious thing. Fortunately, there were still a few people in the imperial court who roughly knew about Jin Qinhuang's plan. That's right, they only roughly knew. So, in the face of such a situation, they were still stable. However, they still had to show anxiety. So, Luo Peishan ran to Lu Chengdi every day, wanting to know the latest news. On the surface, he was as worried as Lu Chengdi, but in his heart, he was full of sympathy for Lu Chengdi. However, other than sympathy, there was nothing else. After all, as a subject, he was not disappointed in the emperor, but in despair. Digression. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/131213228. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version reading website. Bicken.com. Chapter 5:11. After waiting anxiously, it was not in vain. The people sent out eventually brought back some news. After all, the Northwest was so big. It was not a square house. It was unrealistic to rely on manpower to completely block it. Even if the main road north was blocked, there would always be a way to go to other places. However, the news brought back was not so wonderful. Fu Yunting had colluded with the enemy and committed treason. Prince Jin's whereabouts were still unknown. No one knew where he was. Whether he was detained somewhere by Fu Yunting or directly handed over to the Xiongnu as proof of his good relationship with the Xiongnu was still unknown. Such a result naturally made Lu Qingdi furious. Trash, all of them were trash. However, since it was already confirmed that Fu Yunting had committed treason, he could not do nothing. If he directly killed his way back with more than 200,000 troops, wouldn't the Qi Yuan suffer a big loss if they were not prepared? Therefore, at this time, he did not hesitate and directly let Qin Tianming lead the troops to guard Tianmen Pass. For the time being, they should not act rashly. After all, they still did not know Fu Yunting's true purpose. Although Fu Yunting had more than 200,000 troops under his command, fighting a war was not just about fighting people. The imperial court was well aware of the current situation in the northwest. If they really fought, Fu Yunting would definitely not have a good ending. Not to mention other things, they could exhaust him to death. Moreover, Prince Jin was still in his hands. Therefore, Lu Qingdi was somewhat afraid of shooting the rat for fear of breaking the vases. He only defended and did not attack, waiting for Fu Yunting's next move. If he really wanted to do something, he would definitely not hold back his troops. And Qin Tianming happened to be the person who knew about Prince Jin's plan. He became the commander-in-chief of Tianmen Pass, which was the result of many people's secret efforts. In addition to Ruan Ruizhong, Luo Peishan, and others, there was naturally a group of people led by Prince Kong. After all, in his perception, Qin Tianming was still one of his people. At this time, naturally, he would do his best to help him. Because Qin Tianming knew what was going on, he was particularly solemn on the surface. He was not nervous at all. Rather than saying that guarding Tianmen Pass was to guard against Fu Yunting, it was better to say that he was holding the line for Fu Yunting. Therefore, colluding with the enemy and committing treason was simply Prince Jin's roundabout way to get reinforcements for Fu Yunting. Qin Tianming arrived at Tianmen Pass, and the 150,000 troops under his command were all in place. It should be known that these 150,000 troops were not the least bit careless. The military supplies for the logistics were also properly prepared. Compared to Fu Yunting's previous treatment, it was much better. However, these things, except for food, were definitely not needed in Tianmen Pass. However, the other things, were actually prepared for the people outside the pass. Therefore, Li Hongyuan's preparations were absolutely foolproof. When everything was ready, the West Xiongnu Great Sage King also received the news. The Great Sage King, who had a good self-cultivation and had always been cultivating his qi, also broke his cultivation at this moment. Qi Yuan's 150,000 troops have arrived at Tianmen Pass? Originally, his appearance could be considered handsome, but because of his rising anger, his eyes were about to crack, and the veins on his forehead, neck, and the back of his hands suddenly appeared, which was more in line with the temperament and image of the Xiongnu people. Seeing the Great Sage King like this, the person who came to report, in addition to carefully affirming his words, even his breathing slowed down. The Great Sage King was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Some of his anger was directed at the Qi Yuan, but most of it was directed at the internal affairs of the Xiongnu people. If it weren't for that group of people who were dragging them down, how could they be blocked outside Tianmen Pass by the Qi Yuan army? If they had entered Tianmen Pass earlier, even if the Qi Yuan army was far more powerful than the Xiongnu people, he would not be afraid. He also had a way to delay for a long time, and at that time, even the other countries that were in civil strife would definitely want a piece of the cake. No matter what they did, as long as they sent troops and scattered the troops of the Qi Yuan army, it would be time for the Xiongnu people to swallow up the big fat piece of meat that was the Qi Yuan. Now, their king, the brother who grew up with him since childhood, was suspicious of him, and he clearly wanted to summon him back to the palace. Not only that, his brother's eldest son had already brought 2 armies of 10,000 riders and was rushing over. If they were just reinforcements, the Great Sage King would naturally be happy. However, the problem was that they were obviously here to divide the power. If two armies fought, if the commander did not have absolute authority, the consequences would be quite serious. Especially if there were people who specifically went against you. If you pointed to the east, they would attack the west. In this way, even if they had twice the number of people, they would only end up losing in the end. Therefore, it was better to not have these reinforcements. However, what the great sage king did not know was that something even more unfavorable to him had already happened in the palace of the West Xiongnu people. The West Xiongnu king received the latest news that his good brother, because of his ambition, was dissatisfied with his arrangements, actually colluded with the Qi Yuan in an attempt to usurp the throne. In this way, he promised a lot of benefits to the Qi Yuan. The West Xiongnu king did not doubt this at all, because this was the news that he received from his own special channels. How could this kind of thing be tolerated? Immediately, he sent out another son with the most elite troops. He was determined to bring his good younger brother back. If the other party resisted, they would kill him without mercy. At the same time, a small but fierce cavalry troop crossed the border between the West Xiongnu people and the North Xiongnu people. They went deep into the North Xiongnu people and their methods were extremely ruthless. The news quickly spread to the palace of the North Xiongnu people. The North Xiongnu king was so angry that he was panting. Good, very good. At first, they said that they would work together to divide the Qi Yuan, but later on, they attacked him. He had already tolerated the previous incident, but now they actually dared to go even further. Did they really think that because the North Xiongnu people were weaker than the West Xiongnu people, they were so unscrupulous? If that's the case, let's wait and see. As for Li Hongyuan, since he was missing, he naturally pretended to be missing and took Jingwan to another place. https://www.beacon.com/11/11807/1326041. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.beacon.com. Beacon. Com mobile version reading website. Beacon.com. Chapter 512. Your Highness, everything has been arranged. Li Hongyuan nodded nonchalantly and did not say anything else. They had already come this far. If they continued, it would be over. After the messenger confirmed that he had no further instructions, he quietly left the room. Because everything had been arranged, they were relatively free recently. A few days ago, when they were busy, Jingwan and Li Hongyuan had not seen each other for more than 24 hours. One day and one night, it could be said that this was the longest time they had been separated after their marriage. While Li Hongyuan was busy, Jingwan was not at all free. Now, they were completely free, just like most of the time in the capital. Their so-called change of residence was actually still in the prefectural city, and it was not far from their original residence. After listening to the last report, Jingwan held the teacup and silently drank 2 mouthfuls of tea. Yuan, if there are no accidents, we should be able to return to the capital in a month at most, right? There won't be any accidents, because he would never allow it. After everything is done, we definitely can't stay here like in Jiangnan. Why don't we go out for a walk while we still have some time? Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan over to sit on his lap and casually brushed Jingwan's hair. Jingwan shook her head decisively. If it was peacetime, she would definitely be very willing, but now it was not normal. If there were any accidents, even if it was not a threat, she would not be willing to let it happen. Although she believed that her husband would arrange everything, there was no lack of accidents in the world. The way to eliminate accidents was to reduce the chances of accidents as much as possible. Although it did not mean that there would be no accidents if they did not go out. In the future, there may not be a chance. Jingwan understood Li Hongyuan's meaning. Although I yearn for it, it does not mean that I have to go. Just like in her previous life, perhaps she liked to travel, but under the circumstances where the conditions did not allow, she could still stay in the same place. Li Hongyuan did not say anything else, but it was hard to tell what he was thinking in his heart. Fu Yunting knew that his worries had been resolved, so he naturally prepared to go all out. Although Su Mingzhong, who changed his name to Su Bufu, was not a subordinate of Fu Yunting, he was also a highly regarded subordinate of another general. Although he could not casually interject in front of Fu Yunting, he also had a certain right to speak. And Fu Yunting wanted to complete the layout of Li Hongyuan. Those soldiers could be completely concealed, but obviously, his generals could not. Of course, because he was the commander-in-chief, many things did not need to be said very clearly. It was enough to let them know part of it. What kind of person was Su Mingzhong? On the battlefield, he could get to his current position so quickly. Perhaps someone helped him. However, when he was in the imperial court, he could reach the position of assistant minister at the age of 30. It was not only because of the full support of Prince Rue and imperial concubine Su. Some positions, if one did not have the ability, no matter how much support they received, they could not sit still. Therefore, Su Mingzhong was keenly aware of some problems. He didn't dare to act on his own, so he could only secretly contact the capital. However, he quickly realized that he couldn't find a chance to do so. Unknowingly, the military camp was under strict control. To a certain extent, it could be said that not even a fly could get out of here. Because of this understanding, Su Mingzhong was frightened. Fu Yunting, this young man, had his means reached such a level? With the emperor's means, could such a person be easily eradicated? More importantly, he did not know what was going on. Even if he wanted to do something first, it seemed that he did not know where to start. Fu Yunting only wanted to say, haha. There were many things that he was just a scapegoat, okay? The truly terrifying people were actually people who did not take him seriously. The Xiongnu people in the north were ready to rebel at any time. The Xiongnu people were fighting for power in the main tent. Qi Yuan did not have to worry about the rear. Fu Yunting lit the fuse of the final battle. Sitting in the main tent, Fu Yunting's back was as straight as a pole. All the generals under him were standing upright, waiting for him to give military orders. Fu Yunting took the first command flag. He issued military orders one by one. At the same time, because King Daxian had been held back by his own people during this period of time, the originally very long battlefront had shrunk a lot. It was now concentrated in the area of one county. Of course, this area was still not small. However, other than this main battlefield, other places had already been set up. There were unified arrangements for when and what to do. Just when King Daxian was annoyed by his nephew, Qi Yuan's counterattack was very fast. It could be said that King Daxian was caught off guard. In just a short confrontation, King Daxian's heart skipped a beat. Their combat power had increased by more than 30%. King Daxian did not have time to think about the reason behind it. He only knew that things were not good. Originally, according to his previous prestige, organizing a counterattack was not a problem. However, this time he was in trouble. Some people did not listen to his orders at all, especially that good nephew of his. He was arrogant and wanted to snatch the credit. He directly led his subordinates and rushed to Qi Yuan's seemingly weakest flank. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/132604432. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will handle it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken.com mobile version reading website Bicken.com. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.